Okay, welcome everyone to the October 21st meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. If staff could please help me take a roll.
Hello? Okay, great. Chair Burns? Not sure.
Go ahead. To somebody else.
Yeah. Councilmember Isles?
Here.
Councilmember Harkaris?
Here.
Councilmember Rogers?
Here.
Stephanie Murray?
Here.
Fran Sweeney?
Here.
Joanne Zalomi?
Here.
And then Councilmember Burns, are you present? Looks like no. Okay. Yeah, we have to start the webinar actually. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Councilmember Harakaras, the webinar just started. Let's just start over again if you don't mind.
Okay, we'll do, I didn't do a very good job the first time anyway, so we'll just start over. All right, welcome everyone to the October 21st meeting of the Housing and Community Development Committee. If staff could please help me and take a roll call.
Sure. Councilmember Burns. You're on mute.
He's not here technically until we vote him in for participation.
Okay, sounds good. Councilmember Isles.
Here.
Councilmember Harkaras.
Here.
Councilmember Rogers.
I don't think I can
Here.
hear anybody. I don't know if y'all can hear me, but I can't hear anybody.
We can hear you, and we'll address it as soon as possible. Stephanie Murray.
Here.
Fran Sweeney.
Here.
Joanne Zalomi.
Here.
We have quorum.
Great. We will now, since Councilmember Burns is participating remotely for a reason that is approved for virtual participation, but we need to take a vote to approve his virtual member participation.
Mr. Chair, I move that Councilmember Burns be allowed to participate remotely.
I second.
Okay, if we could please have a roll call vote.
Councilmember Isles.
Yes.
Councilmember Harkaras.
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Stephanie Murray.
Aye.
Fran Sweeney.
Aye.
Joanne Zalomi.
Aye.
The ayes have it, and Councilmember Burns will be added to the roll for the committee. That moves us forward to public comment. If we could have the list of public comment sign up. Okay, sure. We'll start with folks that signed up in person to speak in person, and everyone will have 3 minutes. And first on the list is Eric Passett, and he will be followed by Sarah Peterson.
I'm Eric Passett, and most people know I'm the owner of North Shore Apartments and Condos and a citizen of the 4th Ward. And I guess I wanted to ask a question, if I could. We went through extensive rewriting of the RLTO laws about a year and a half ago or something like that, and back and forth, and came up with the new RLTO laws. And then Envision 2045 has just cause put back in it. Now, wouldn't that have to go through this committee to be put back into the, I assume that would become a law or an ordinance. Wouldn't that have to come back to this committee first before they could decide that? I mean, it's a question.
This is public comment, and we can address that later.
I guess.
And this will be addressed when
Oh,
the proceedings.
I didn't realize that's being addressed tonight because I didn't see it in the
it's one of the topics. So,
Okay,
yeah.
I appreciate that. That's all I'm asking. I guess I'm finding that very disturbing. We went through months of debate about that, along with some other pretty egregious things towards landlords, and that was decided to not be put in there. And I mean, I have never seen in our LTO laws more anti-landlord than I've seen in these ones. And now you're going to add some more. I have nothing against, like, I know you guys are bringing some charges against Quadell for some, let's say, pretty egregious practices. I don't have any issues with things like that. I think people should be, brought to justice with situations like that. However, with landlords who abide by the laws, that just cause is just root with problems that, I've already brought up before. And if you want local landlords to be a part of, tomorrow, at least the people I work for have decided not to buy in Evanston anymore. And we're part of affordable housing. We don't buy buildings and then demolish them and put up new ones that cost thousands of dollars. We try to keep our rents pretty reasonable and pretty low. Every time you put one of these new laws in, whether it's healthy building ordinance, just cause, it's more discouragement for us, people like us, to want to invest in Evanston. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Peterson, and she will be followed by Paul Breslin.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Peterson, and I'm a resident and homeowner in the 6th Ward, and I'm the Executive Director of Open Communities, which is a housing justice nonprofit in the 2nd Ward. And first, I'd like to applaud the city for the Housing for All plan and the thoughtfulness and work that you've put into this to holistically think about what housing solutions we need in our community. So often at many HCDC and city council meetings over the last few years, I've heard many of my neighbors expressing concern that zoning reform, for instance, won't be enough to solve our affordable housing crisis. And I have to really agree with them that we need a multi-pronged approach to take this issue at many different areas. And I really appreciate that the Housing for All plan does begin to list a number of solutions that working together can really help Evanston. I think the fact that you include preservation of existing housing, development of new affordable housing, as well as protection of tenants from displacement is going to be so important as we look to make this plan work for everyone. And I know some of my colleagues and neighbors and advocates together wrote a letter that gave more specific recommendations on points that I appreciate you all taking into consideration. And I just want to emphasize and urge you all to continue to go from the base of this plan and to continue to make it more concrete, to make it more explicit as far as timelines, as far as benchmarks along the way, so that we can really have an actionable plan that we can use and that will support our community and really actualizing these goals and addressing the housing crisis. I know for me as a homeowner and for many of us that have a safe roof over our heads, we might feel like we have the luxury of time to go months and years and looking at some of these plans. But many of our neighbors are at real risk of losing their home, becoming homeless, facing eviction or foreclosure. And I just really urge us to be thoughtful in our approach, but also be efficient so that we can move this forward and really start addressing this crisis as soon as possible. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Paul Breslin, and he will be followed by Frank Hill.
Hi, Paul Breslin. You will be pleased to know that I have a few nice things to say about this rather than criticizing everything. My main problem with the Envision plan is that it treats a very complex problem as if it were simple. The Housing for All document is better. It acknowledges difficulty. It sets a clear and realistic goal, which is to reduce the 35% of cost-burdened households to 25 to 30% within 10 years. That is attainable, and it does not claim to be a miracle cure. H4A also recommends on page 37 exactly the kind of careful inventory of existing housing that is lacking in the Envision plan. It considers land trust, community housing, and subsidies from the city, which are only lightly touched on in EE 2045. However, this plan also has a problem. It mentions and very briefly describes 27 programs that could help us solve our housing problem, but it says very little about how they might be coordinated or about the financial aspect, how much subsidy does each provide, or do some of them have to be subsidized by the city? It's kind of as if you ordered a device with many moving parts that you had to assemble when it arrived, but the instruction manual was missing. It's everything only connected by and. There needs to be more of a structure, a coordinated strategic marshaling of these strategies. I'm also very concerned about the property rights transfer part, which says that you can deed your, if you can sell your property rights to a developer who is in an area where a taller building may be made. So if you're in a zone where the maximum height of right is 30 feet, you can sell that 30 feet to a developer and they can tack 30 feet onto the building. I understand that a version of this is connected with the 605 Davis project, and that's the arrangement with the university building to get around this. So because it's not permitted to do that without having partial ownership by the other party. I'm very concerned about this because you could just collect a whole bunch of these property transfers and put the Empire State Building on Chicago Avenue, and I don't want that to happen. So that, and I also wanted to discuss some things which 4 of you have already seen slides about last night. And that is, if you'll allow me another couple of minutes, there is already gentrification going on in many wards, including the 3rd, 5th, 6th, 7th, 9th. And what's happening is developers are buying relatively inexpensive single-family houses, converting them into duplexes where each unit costs 3 times as much as the original house. They're putting up single-family homes on vacant lots that are over $1 million. And this is happening already.
Thank you.
Give me 15, 20 more seconds. Another speaker said, well, that's already legal under the present zoning, so why are you concerned about the zoning? It's bad, but if you upzone R1 and R2, it won't be duplexes that are more expensive replacing single-family houses that are less expensive. It'll be 4 flats or maybe even 6 flats where each unit is more expensive than the other house. That would be terrible. And I think there has to be a very strong and enforceable anti-displacement, anti-gentrification clause in any strategy that we adopt, or we are going to see some really awful stuff. And that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Next up is Frank Hill, followed by Roger Williams.
Good evening. Frank Hill, Vice President of Rezoning for a Better Evanston and 7th Ward Detached Single Family Homeowner. I want to agree with what Paul Breslin said. Rezoning does not solve affordable housing. There is no miracle solution to affordable housing. And that's what makes the strategic housing plan, yes, part of the steps that solve affordable housing. That's the goal. One of the goals being to integrate across Evanston by socioeconomic and class, where Evanston is now segregated. So I just want to agree with Paul Breslin and say, and that's what this is for. Okay. I am overall impressed with the work of the city staff in drafting the Housing for All plan and thank them for their hard work. Council members received a letter on October 16th containing feedback from the Housing Collective last week. October 16th, a coalition of Evanston's affordable housing advocacy organizations. I want to explicitly incorporate all of that feedback by reference into my comments here tonight. And any of the people on the committee who haven't received that letter because you're not on council that will be available to you should you want it. I've gotten confirmation of that. Above and beyond what was mentioned in the Housing Collective letter, I want to say that Rezoning for a Better Evanston urges that the strategic housing plan needs more specifics about all the approaches. I expect that those will come as the city and the committee continues to communicate about strategies outlined in the plan. And going forward, there needs to be a financial assistance for middle-income, first-time home buyers in Evanston, whether those buyers come from within Evanston or from outside of Evanston. Middle-income, first-time home buyers, especially Black and brown households, often do not have the generational wealth for very specific reasons to put a down payment on something that might otherwise be in range of their monthly income. We need to fund any initiatives, of course, and I would suggest that the City of Evanston look into creative funding sources, such as issuing municipal social bonds, as suggested in the letter from the Housing Collective. Often, despite the city perhaps lacking funding and raising property taxes across the board, the money exists in this community to creatively fund these types of projects. When something needs to be built in Evanston, it gets built. Crown Center, when somebody needs to raise money for their school, they raise money for their school. There's lots of wealthy individuals in this community who would be happy to invest in the community, or so I've been told. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Roger Williams, followed by Jean Lindwall.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Roger Williams. I'm a realtor here in Evanston and the president of Rezoning for a Better Evanston. Regarding the strategic housing plan, one of your goals stated was, quote, to eradicate segregation by narrowing the variation of household income, race, and net worth by census tract. That's an honorable and yet unachievable goal unless it is accompanied by a realistic plan. Here's the two-part plan that will work. Part one, legalize 4 or more unit housing by right across all the residential districts in Evanston. Part two, lower the threshold of the inclusive housing ordinance to 4 units. Now, this plan contrasts with building duplexes. Duplexes do not work to eradicate segregation because they do not impact density or affordability. But by implementing 4 or more units housing, Evanston will begin to provide an affordable housing for the missing middle, which are moderate and middle professionals such as teachers, police officers, firefighters, and workforce employees. In addition, this plan will slow the out-migration of Black residents from Evanston and welcome a wider range of neighbors across the city. Think 4 or more. Think of 4 or more by 4. 4 or more units and an IOHO threshold that kicks in at 4. Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Jean Lindwall, and after that, I think Kim, and I can't read. Okay, thanks.
Good evening. I'm Jean Lindwall. I think as many of you know, I'm chair of the Land Use Commission, but I'm speaking strictly as a private individual this evening. First of all, I want to support those who have said, you've got a solid draft with strong supporting data to work with, which I think is really, important. And actually, what I'd like to know, is this is really a continuation of policies and objectives that go back 50 plus years. And just for fun, those are copies of the living area and housing goals and objectives and policies that are from the 1974 comprehensive plan. So we've been at this a long time. I'd like to, really encourage you to be open-minded and thoughtful in your deliberations. The process does not need to be divisive. It can build on consensus around solutions that make sense for Evanston, rather than embracing the hot planning concepts of the day, i.e. the missing middle housing concept. Whoa, haven't been talking that long, have I?
You can keep on. I might have goofed on the timer here. Yeah.
Anyway, because that's a concept that was developed that I support, but it was developed by an architect planner who wrote a book and has developed a very positive and successful practice around that. 20 years ago, it was new urbanism. With respect to the missing middle housing types, they really don't address the needs of the middle-income senior households, of which I am one. At some point, I'm not going to want to be in a house with stairs, which means I'm looking for an 2 or 3 bedroom unit with an elevator, with elevators. So I think that there's a mismatch there. I'd also like to suggest how that you explore how the inclusionary housing ordinance really and the potential housing impact fees will impact unit affordability for market rate owners and renters. One of the things projects that came before the Land Use Commission some time ago was a real interesting adaptive reuse of a former commercial building into cooperative units. But the inclusionary housing fee essentially added $48,000 to each of those units. So that tends to kind of work against affordability. Also, the zoning code already contains many of the reforms suggested. And clearly, since we now have container homes and work-live units, and there's a cluster housing mini-home project under construction, it's unclear exactly how the zoning code needs to change there. Historically, as new dwelling types have been brought to Evanston, regulations have been changed to accommodate them. I'm not sure what building code updates are needed to reduce housing construction costs, and would like to note that what we want is, safe housing, not poorly built housing. Finally, the concept of friction, which your development consultants mentioned during their presentation of kind of in the gap analysis, is important. I think whatever strategies are adopted will collectively probably result in modest success, which I think is okay. It's a realistic outcome. And then as you move forward, I'd like to encourage you and staff to take a look at the types of housing, neighborhood-based residential developments that have occurred, especially in the R3 and R4 districts that already include a mix of housing types ranging from the single family up to the smaller multifamily buildings, to see what lessons can be drawn. And with that, good luck.
Thank you. Then that concludes folks that signed up in person to speak in person. And Marion,
we have
a list of
4 more people. The next person to comment will be Linda Demashek, and after that, Hiram Flores.
I'm going to operate the computer for that. I won't say anything.
He's my photo op guy. Okay, so there's so much to say, and so I highly recommend that you have another meeting in 2 weeks so that there's more time that we can cover. I've got detailed things that we're not have time to cover. Anyway, big picture, I'm an experienced low-income housing developer, and so I want to assure you that I think affordable housing is extremely important. However, I do not support blanket upzoning as a strategy that should be included in your strategies. And the primary reason for that is because essentially you're giving control to the developers. They will build to the highest amount possible. And so while there's things in the housing strategy that are very good, focusing on single-family homes, 2 to 4 unit buildings, et cetera, is all fine and good in the theory. But then you have to think, what happens in real life with profit-motivated developers? And what we know what happens in real life is they develop luxury units. And we have here photographs of luxury units that they were naturally occurring affordable housing to begin with. And what's been developed might sound like it's good. A duplex, great. They're not. They're new construction. They're expensive. They're $1.5 million for each side of the duplex. So a property that had an affordable housing unit on there for $400,000 now has $3 million on the same lot. Now, every developer is going to want to do that. If you give them the leeway to do that, they will. And so that will not benefit. So we have examples from the 3rd ward, from the 4th ward, from the 5th ward, from the 9th ward. So this is just the precursor. You know, this is what developers will do. This is not academic. This is real life. This is profit motivated. So for that reason, though you want your developers to take your preferred strategy, they're not going to do that. It's just the real world. The other thing is that you should eliminate from the strategic housing plan is the transfer of development rights. That's basically selling the air rights. So a single-family homeowner of a 2-story house could say, I'm not going to knock it down and build 4 units. I'll sell my air rights, and I'll sell it to a downtown developer. And pretty soon, every downtown developer will have amassed enough extra bonus density that every single building, high-rise building in downtown will be 100 units. And then you will also have that happening on the corridors, and you'll also have that happen in the neighborhood centers. So you will have unbelievable density, and that is not effective. And I have many more things to say. Some of them are small and minute, and I can send it in a letter, but I encourage you to have a second meeting because there's an awful lot to say.
Thank you. And folks are always welcome to email staff, and they can distribute presentations or slides to all the BCC members.
Yes, the next person will be Hiram Flores.
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Hiram Flores, and I'm a first year at Northwestern, and I currently live in the 1st Ward. And I'm here to talk about the benefits of Section 1.5, which is the Preservation Fund for NOAA units. So the city of Evanston will always have a strong demand for more housing. It's no secret. We're talking about upper year students, grad students, post-grads, basically anyone who is willing to pay will pay. And, you know, the closer you are to campus, the higher the rent will naturally be. And one solution would be to naturally build more housing, but that's where preservation comes into play, and that's why it's ultimately so important. And if you look in Section 1.5, where it talks about creating a preservation fund for this naturally occurring affordable housing unit, it's essentially guaranteeing that the city can preserve a lot of these units for these working class families. Think of it as a way to keep existing naturally affordable housing from being snapped up and turned into luxury micro lofts with exposed brick that if rent out could expose a bank account. Like cities like Minneapolis have already done this, and they've held properties that are about to go market rate, and they keep rent stable for working families. If Evanston were to create a similar fund like this plan proposes, it could protect a lot of residents from being ultimately priced out while making room for students and newcomers. Because ultimately what makes Evanston great is not just the new, but it's also the old as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next commenter will be Sharimer Shavanis.
Good evening, members of HCDC. My name is Shreemer Shivanis. I'm Associate Director of Advocacy, Connections for the Homeless, who've served about 3,400 Evanstonians in fiscal year 2024. It's clear work and dedication has gone into Housing for All. You know, the plan's scope, data, and intentions demonstrate a clear recognition of Evanston's urgent housing needs and the structural inequities that have contributed to them. At the same time, after careful review, Housing for All must be strengthened before adoption to ensure it truly delivers housing justice for everyone. Explore and consider isn't good enough. We need to commit to making it happen, right? The plan must move from aspiration to action with measurable goals, clear accountability, and deadlines that reflect the urgency of the need for housing in Evanston. A few suggestions. How about we strengthen commitments by replacing vague language with concrete targets? Incorporate by right development for multi-unit and missing middle housing so good projects aren't stalled or blocked by process. Expand anti-displacement and tenant protections, including stronger oversight. Prioritize new housing and preservation efforts by neighborhood need, so every ward shares in responsibility and opportunity. And also ensure oversight, including residents directly impacted by housing insecurity. We all know the stakes: families priced out, seniors unable to downsize, workers who serve our city but can't afford to live here, right? Let's make sure this plan is measurable, accountable, and real, so years from now we can look back and say we built a city that truly housed all people. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next commenter is Dominic Voss.
Thanks, everybody. Good evening. Just want to underscore everything that Sreemar Shavana has just said. So I'm here representing Open Communities. I'm the Director of Fair Housing at Open Communities. We think the Strategic Housing Plan draft has a ton of things right. The focus on racial integration, creation of new units, preservation of naturally occurring affordable housing, protection of our most vulnerable incumbent residents. As usual, the devil is in the details, and we really encourage the committee to, work with advocates, developers, housing providers, everybody to get those details right. We encourage committee members to review the letter that we issued by way of joining forces for affordable housing a few days ago. And we really want to ensure that sufficient research and granularity winds up in the final plan. There are lots of strong indications from the community feedback summary that was provided in the packet. To name a few, lots of support for creating new housing supply, for utilizing partnerships with religious institutions, for protecting residents from displacement, and for allowing existing buildings to be adapted and utilized for housing. Those things have broad support. We believe that we need to get the priorities figured out a little bit better in the plan. And as part of that, we strongly encourage that exploring tenant protections be sort of top of list, including re-engaging the conversations on just cause, especially that those be moved from a sort of nebulous 6-year timeline to an immediate to 1-year timeline. 6 years is just too far, and we believe that renters are suffering retaliation, discrimination, and fundamental unfairness under current law. In summary, Open Communities is here to support these ideas in the plan. We think it's really strong. We want to encourage more detail in terms of funding, evidence of results in similar cities, and finally to demand that the most vulnerable, as opposed to the most vocal, in Evanston are kept top of mind throughout the process. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
We have one more commenter online, John Story Williamson.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good evening. John Story Williamson, 864 Sheridan Road. I'm a lifelong Evanston resident, a real estate professional, and a strong supporter of expanding homeownership opportunities in Evanston. The Housing for All draft rightly recognizes that some Evanstonians are cost burdened, but it fails to act on what the data clearly shows. The greatest instability exists among renters, not homeowners. The city's own housing survey shows that roughly half of renter households are cost burdened, compared to only about a quarter of homeowners. That gap tells us that the surest path to stability is ownership, yet this plan measures success by how many units we build rather than how many households become homeowners. If Evanston truly wants lasting affordability, the focus should be on increasing owner occupancy, particularly among young families and first-time buyers. I urge you to add that as a measurable goal in the plan. Increasing opportunities for ownership isn't just about economics, it's about community continuity. District 65 has seen sharp enrollment declines in recent years, and one obstacle to revitalization is a shortage of attainable family-oriented homes for purchase for young families. Too much of the new housing being proposed consists of rental apartments which do little to attract or retain families with children. When young households can't find homes with enough bedrooms or space to grow, they leave Evanston, and our schools, tax base, and neighborhood vitality all suffer. I'm concerned by the overwhelming emphasis on multifamily rental construction. Page after page of this plan prioritizes density code changes and zoning shifts that enable apartments, but there's almost nothing about supporting single-family or small-scale ownership opportunities. The National Association of Home Builders study, What Home Buyers Really Want, found that over 75% of buyers prefer a detached single-family home, while fewer than 10% seek a multifamily unit. That reflects what I see daily in my own practice. Strong buyer demand for starter homes under about $525,000 and a real shortage of them here in Evanston. Instead of pushing more apartment blocks, the city should be creating pathways for people to own, down payment assistance, shared equity purchase programs, or conversions to homeownership. We also need to be careful not to penalize investment in our existing housing stock. The proposed housing impact fee could raise costs for families improving or expanding their homes, and the proposed anti-deconversion policy would prevent families from restoring 2 or 3 flats into single-family homes, further limiting the supply of ownership housing. In short, Evanston doesn't need more density for density's sake. We need more stability, more ownership, and a stronger middle class that can afford to stay. Homeownership is not the problem, it's the solution. I request that it be prioritized in our city's strategic housing. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes?
This is the end of public comment.
That
Do
is
not
the
have
end
any
of
more.
public comment. Is there anyone here who missed the sign-up sheet? Last chance. Going once, going twice. So thank you for everyone's feedback. We will now move forward on our agenda. This is the exciting part. We have introduction of new committee members. So if the new committee members could just take a moment and introduce yourself.
Oh, I thought it was on. Hi, I'm Stephanie Murray. I'm local Evanstonian. I live in Evanston. I work in Evanston. I went to school in Evanston, and I'm happy to serve the community again. I was previously on the Affordable Housing Steering Committee pre-COVID, so happy to be here.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Corey King. I've been in Evanston for 12 years. Happy to be here. I did not grow up here. I didn't go to school here, but I love it here. Both of my kids are in school here, and happy to be on the committee. So, thanks.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to working with you all. This brings us to the approval of meeting minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I would move item 5A, approval of the minutes from the September 16th, 2025 meeting.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any corrections? That'll.
I just have one. It's a really typo. Under section 5, staff reports and updates, it says Baines provided and updated. I think it should be update.
You guys catch that? Or did you repeat that again?
Okay,
Joanne?
under staff reports and updates, in the first sentence, it says under E, Baines provided and updated on the approval. I think it should be update. Just need to take a D out. That's all I have.
Okay. Seeing that, I think we can take a roll call vote on the approval.
Chair Burns. Councilmember Burns, you need to toggle a setting and accept the panelist invitation in order to participate. Perfect.
Yeah, sorry, I was sitting in the text saying my mic was disabled, but they just switched me to a panelist, so I'm good to go. All right.
Perfect. Councilmember Isles,
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris,
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers,
Aye.
Stephanie Murray,
I abstain.
Fran Sweeney,
Aye.
Joanne Zalomi.
Aye.
The ayes have it. So
Mr. King to the,
actually,
Mr. King is not able to vote tonight because his onboarding is not complete, but he's
Okay.
able to participate in the meeting.
Actually, I did submit this afternoon. So the OMA was submitted this afternoon.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then that changes.
On the plane.
Corey King. Thank you.
Great. So, and we can, for the record, we'll add Mr. King to the roll, so he will be voting this evening. Great. So that moves us to new business and old business. Just for people following along, we're going to shake up the order of items. 6A will actually be moved after 6C. So if we can start off with item B, if we can have a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I'd move item 6B, an update on the MTO landlord-tenant walk-in hours program.
I'll second.
Okay. Do we have
Yes.
presentation here?
We don't have a presentation, but we have an introduction to Philip Devon from the Metropolitan Tenants organization, who will be speaking, answering question about this item and the next item. So the first item on the agenda is related to the pilot for the walk-in hours program that was extended in June for another 3 months. We've provided in the memo information about the session that were rescheduled. As part of this extension, the location was changed to vary throughout the city, and hours as well was changed. The attendance ended up being lower than the initial pilot, 3 months pilot. There was 11 total attendees, although there was a higher share of Evanston attendees at this version. We did seem to notice that the change in location seemed to be less helpful for participants. There was less of an attendance when the workshop took place at locations that were not at the library. I do want to note the library has also been active in providing some outreach and helping promote the program, so that could have something to do with it. So the discussion for today after question is to understand from the committee's perspective whether they wish to extend the pilot, include it in the 2026 potential agreement, or whether to stop the session based on the result around the attendance.
Okay, right.
Yeah, and we have Philip.
Good evening. Hello. Well, I'm sure you can all hear me. Good evening. I'm a staff attorney, Philip Devon. I'm with the Metropolitan Tenants organization. And I didn't do any of the walk-in hours, but I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions if anyone has any.
Great. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Isles.
Okay, so turnout is pretty low at these events. So I'm not sure this is the right way to do outreach. I do like the concept, though. I do want it to continue. Are there some alternative options that you might be able to offer so that we can provide this service in a way that's reaching more people?
I think what I believe has maybe already been recommended in this memo is probably what MTO also would think it would be most effective, which is two things. One is doing it at the library, which really does a good job of doing their own advertising and really gets the word out well. And then keeping it in, if it is the library, that same location for the duration so that people can start to understand there's a schedule and can come in at regular times on a regular basis as opposed to switching it up. But I think that would be, and we may, we could also offer by appointment if that's easier as opposed to, folks being stuck. But I think sticking out at one location would be best in our opinion.
All of these hours are during business hours. That could be a reason why turnout is so low. Have you considered some evenings?
I don't know that we've considered staffing walk-ins for evenings, but it's certainly something that could be considered.
We did consider different hours, and we did have 2 slots that were 3 to 6 p.m. That provided a little bit of later hours than the usual 4 or 5 o'clock to allow for some people to join at 6 based on MTO's availability. 3 to 6 probably would be staff's recommendation if you decide to keep going with this. Although from the details of the turnout, we had similar turnout at 10 to 1 than at 3 to 6.
I can tell you when I have ward meeting hours, I do get pushback when I start at 6. People like, I haven't gotten home from work yet. Can you start at 7? Things like that. So I wonder, and I know the library's open until 9 most nights. I wonder if it would be worth trying one that's after the time most people come home from work.
Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you. I think you did answer one of my questions, which was kind of the where were we seeing people fall time slot wise? Could you remind us what were the numbers for the previous pilot so I can sort of gauge?
So last pilot, we had 6 sessions, and the total number of Evanston attendee was 7. And total number of attendee was 26. However, there was one session that garnered a lot of attendees because there was a webinar around the update to the RLTO. This session, there was 5 sessions with 8 Evanston attendees and 11 total attendees. As far as the times, the best attendance we saw was at the Evanston Library. The highest attendance was between 3 to 6 at the library. However, there was none at 3 to 6 at Crown, as an example. Afternoon 1 to 4 had 2, and 10 to 1 had 5. But it's very anecdotal. We had 1 session, so it's hard to make decision just on 1 session. But that's the number we saw.
Yeah, I would tend to go along with what Councilmember Isles had mentioned that, when we're trying to schedule ward activities, meetings, things like that, I don't even start before 6:30, usually, because that gives people time to get home, grab a bite to eat, then go out. So if there's any way that we could extend some hours into the evening, even if it is till from 6:30 to 8 or something like that, maybe, and as a way to try to reach people more when it's convenient for them to be able to stop in after they've gotten home, walked the dog, fed the kids, done whatever needs to be done before going out again for something else. So that would be my recommendation, is if we do continue to kind of look at creating some later time slots there.
A question for Philip.
Yeah, I don't think, that sounds like something MTO could certainly make happen and could certainly discuss with city staff what might work best, whether that's rotating every other month or whatever that may look like. But it sounds
and it might be worth adding 1 or 2 in just to see if it does pick up there. If it's the same as everything else, maybe that's not the solution. But if we see more people being able to come at that time, then maybe that is the solution that we're looking for.
Great.
Joanne?
Yeah, I just want to comment. Yeah, I think it makes sense to just be at the library, so it's stability, so everybody knows, where they can expect to be. I think it's good to try maybe some evening hours, but not everyone works 9 to 5 anymore. People do have various time schedules, and split schedules or gig jobs. So, that'd be affecting the people that would need to talk to. But I think it's worth a try to at least try, 1 or 2 evening sessions during the year.
Absolutely.
Great. I think, is it anything else from?
Yeah, I
from
think,
staff?
so the pilot was voted for another 3 months. So if the committee's direction is that they want to continue the pilot and maybe try some extended hours, then I would need a motion and a vote from the committee to continue till December, or then they would have to pick up back in January if the renewal is approved.
So, correct me if I'm wrong here, committee members. So my feeling is the consensus is that we want to continue the pilot for another 3 months, 4 months, 3?
Until the end of the year.
Until the end of the year, and focusing on using the library, because I think that seems the most successful for attendance, and that we would like to also pilot some later evening hours. Does that, I'm reading the room, does that sound good to everyone? Great.
And with this extension, I may ask to move to 1 monthly, just because A, that's the proposal for 26, and B, there's the holidays, so it'd be hard anyway to fit 2 in November and December.
Great. So I guess we're ready to do the vote then? Great.
Chair, I had a couple comments, quick comments.
Councilmember Burns.
That was real quick. Yeah, so definitely support having later evening hours, but I also think, so I think their early times could work for certain people too, depending on who they are. So I don't know if there's a way where we can, alternate between weeks where 1 week is earlier, 1 week is later. But I do think there are some people that we would accommodate by having earlier hours as well. And it sounds like that 10 to 1 is a slot that has been convenient for some folks. Agree, one location is a good idea. I also think platforms like Doodle, but online appointment scheduling can be a very powerful tool to just allow people to quickly, whoever is holding the meetings, I'm not sure if that's Jonah or someone else, but just this is my availability, and allowing, people to do to schedule appointments, maybe some walk-in hours as well. But I do think having that online scheduling platform can help people, set aside time where they know, both parties are available. And then I've said this a few times, but I really think that figuring out how to get other organizations to promote the program is incredibly important. We know there are people out here who need, this service or this level of support. We have a lot of renters in Evanston. I think the reality is that many are probably unaware that this exists. And so I think what I heard is the library, they've started to promote it, and we've seen more referrals maybe from the library. So I'd love for us to, for MTO to try to connect with Connections for the Homeless. We have Open Communities present today. Maybe, after the meeting, you can talk to them about figuring out how they can promote this to their participants and community members that they work with. And that's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no more lights. So we can take a roll call vote.
I don't believe there was a second on your motion, which I'm happy to do.
That's true, there wasn't.
I'm happy
So
to
you're
second.
seconding? Okay. Gotta cross our T's and dot our I's. Okay, we're ready to take a vote.
Sorry, who seconded?
I seconded.
Yeah.
I thought you made the motion.
The chair made the motion.
I made
For
the
this one,
motion.
okay,
Yeah.
sounds good. Chair Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Isles.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Corey King.
Aye.
Stephanie Murray.
Aye.
Fran Sweeney.
Aye.
Joanne Jalomi.
Aye.
The ayes have it. So that will be moving forward with a slight change. And that will bring us to item 6B, if I can have a motion, please. Or 6C, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I would move item 6C, approval of a renewal contract for landlord-tenant services with Metropolitan Tenants Organization and Law Center for Better Housing for January 1, 2026 through December 31, 2026.
I'll second.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on this item?
Yes, so again, Philip Devon here from Metropolitan Tenant Organization to discuss or answer any question around this renewal. This collaboration has existed between the City of Evanston and MTO for several years to provide landlord-tenant services, hotline services that now includes texting, and they're also currently working on the chatbot and also the walk-in hours. The agreement includes basic scope as well as optional additional services. While the agreement renewal is up to $91,600, we usually don't see that full cost being spent. Historically, the cost of the services has stayed very close to the basic scope of services, which includes the hotline and the trainings. The optional services include the additional mediation services, the tenant organizing, potential legal representations through the collaboration with Law Center for Better Housing. And then this year and next year, it would include the customer-facing web application, which is the chatbot, to be able to provide self-service help to residents after hours. And then the optional walk-in hour as well. So we carved out in this agreement enough room to potentially cover every single one of those items should they be utilized, but historically that has not been the case. It's on an as-needed basis.
Great, thank you for that recap. I don't see any lights. I'll quick just put my 2 cents in. I think is an incredibly useful tool for residents. I thankfully am not referring people all the time, but when people do have issues and they don't know where to turn to and they're in this, conundrum, I'd say call MTO. They'll help you out. It's incredibly helpful, and I've gotten good feedback from the people who've reached out for help. So I'm glad that we do this on a yearly basis. So if I don't see any other lights or comments, any questions? A whole bunch of them. So, Commissioner Sweeney.
Yes, I would reiterate everything you just said. I think it's an extremely helpful resource. I have used it, frankly, as of people I personally know, and I think the expertise there, they just do as good a job as they can with the resources they have.
Thank you. Commissioner Zalomi.
Yes, one thing that I'm trying to find the right page, but I can't. But I thought that they had said that they could not agree to the additional bond that the city was requesting.
That's been standard ever since the agreement started.
That's been what?
That's been standard in this agreement since the agreement started. We just
Okay.
always include it.
So they are agreeing to the additional bond or not?
No, I think it gets reduced to $1 million, if I
so
believe,
it's
instead of the $5 million.
Okay. Because my other comment is, now I see that this year included in the extra amount is $18,000 towards web designing, but that part of the contract has been so underused, at least the amount, in other years.
Yes.
But should we increase the base amount and lower that extra work amount?
So the base amount includes the standard scope for the hotline. The web chat is a one-time implementation fee that you've seen in the contract over the last couple years because we postponed it because there was not really a point in implementing a chatbot that was utilizing the last residential landlord-tenant ordinance and would have had to be fully updated for the updates. So now that the landlord-tenant ordinance has been implemented and then MTO has helped the city with the education and outreach, we're now picking that project up to be able to implement it with the new laws.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wonder why there is such a discrepancy between what the contract can be allocated to for the extra work versus what it's actually used over the years.
That's because the contract is split between the cost of the services for the basic cost, and then anything else is a optional as needed basis. Are you?
Well, yeah, I realize that, but I just wonder why there's been such a discrepancy in what would be allowed, the highest amount allowed for extra work versus what has actually been billed.
Okay. So of the additional services, there's been tenant organizing has increased in the last year, but originally in the early years of the contract, there was less activity around tenant organizing. Legal representation, we haven't had any or much billing on this because the Cook County legal aid tends to cover most of the needs, and the case taken up by the legal representation here usually are very specific case-by-case basis that cannot be covered by the Cook County legal aid. The customer-facing web application is a one-time implementation, so that's why. And then the walk-in hours are a new additional option. And historically, mediation has been provided, sometime not always billed, we'll say.
Well, do we expect, I see there's a couple of billings to come, but you don't know exactly what they will be at this point?
So we know what they will be as far as what the basic scope is, because the basic scope is divided in 4 equal payment, and then everything else depends on the activity and the need of the residents reaching out for the services.
So has that helped with some of the tenants, getting organized? Has that been in the billings that will be to come, most likely? Or?
Yeah, the tenant organization has definitely been in the earlier, in this year's billing. And yes, that's part of some of the increase we're seeing a little bit. And I can have Phil talk more about the organizing efforts.
Okay. I mean, I just wondered, it's too bad that more of that part of money isn't utilized to some respect.
Right. Are you hoping maybe for more outreach? I mean, they're billing based on the services they're providing, so.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's a need out there, and whether it's just not reaching people who need the help.
Okay, we can definitely discuss with MTO and ways to do more outreach on that.
Yeah, okay.
Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you. I think this has been a pretty successful program from what I can tell. Do you have numbers to share, like, how many people are accessing the hotline, those sorts of numbers?
Yes, so MTO provides reports twice a year. The last report was in June, and on average, we saw a little bit of a spike during and after COVID, but the trend has stayed pretty steady around 365 cases. The agreement is for an average of 40 cases per month. It fluctuates throughout the year because of the peak in rental season. But generally speaking, that's between 30 and 40 calls a month. I'm happy to provide the last report, and then MTO will be back in January to provide an updated report as well.
I think it's good because this is one, we were talking a little bit ago about the numbers for the drop-in aren't quite what we're expecting, but this one seems to be doing well.
Yes.
And there's even a little room for growth in it as well, built into what we're providing and the capacity that's there. So I think to kind of pick up a little bit, I think, promoting this, I mean, I think a lot of people reach out to council members looking for assistance and we refer them. But if there's a way to bypass us, that's even better.
Yeah, so the existence of this program is what we have as evergreen content for the city newsletter and social media. So it's promoted at least every couple months in a newsletter. We also work with the library, but I would agree the services, we see the same number of cases, but it seems the awareness of the program is growing in a positive direction, and we can always do better.
And maybe it's, maybe we do a big push during I don't even know what the rental months are anymore. It's like October and May or something.
Yes, September, May. So usually we try to have like webinars and content that kind of align with like 2 to 3 months before this, because that's usually when people get their notice renewals. Sometimes it's about the heat calls or anything like that. So we try to time those webinars. We also are about to launch on the website the evergreen videos. So all the videos are around the residential tenant line ordinance that Phil actually recorded that are going to be available on YouTube and also going to be available as a resource answering the frequently asked questions in a short kind of video snippet form for residents to be able to access. So we'll probably have a launch in November around that and another communication push.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I think we're ready for a vote on the contract.
Chair Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Isles.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Commissioner King.
Aye.
Commissioner Murray.
Aye.
Commissioner Sweeney. Commissioner Zalomi.
Aye.
The ayes have it. And so we will move along. We'll jump back up to the first item on our agenda of new business, old business. If I can have a motion in relation to item A, please.
Mr. Chair, I would move item 6A, approval of renewal funding to administer the inclusionary housing wait list.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. If we have start the discussion, please.
Yes. So tonight we have Amy Kaufman from Community Partner for Affordable Housing here to answer any question. This is related to the renewal funding to administer the inclusionary housing waitlist. This is a collaboration with between the City of Evanston and CEPA since 2017 for the management of the waitlist and income certification for eligible tenants that would access the inclusionary housing units that are created as part of the inclusionary housing ordinance. This renewal is for $87, which is flat to last year, despite an increase in units that are going to be served from 78 to 84. A compliance on 7 additional units, and then some potential additional units that are going to be coming from condo deconversion compliance. And Amy's here for questions.
Councilmember Isles.
If perhaps 605 Davis goes through and there's the addition of 86 more, which is everything we've ever gotten from this program so far. So it basically doubles. What happens to your fees? Do they double? What?
Well, that's a good question. They are likely not to double, but we're obviously going to have to increase capacity a little bit. We manage these wait lists not for particular properties, but for the program as a whole. So the process won't change. But obviously the number of units is going to go from 84 to 168 or 170. But the process is the same. We had up until about 3 months ago, a 75% person with me on inclusionary housing, with me overseeing it. And now we have 100% person because we've needed to scale up anyway for There's a lot of activity in inclusionary housing generally, and also quite a bit in Evanston. So we'll be okay. I don't think our fees are going to double. It's obviously something we will, be watching carefully. They probably will have to increase, but no, I don't think they're going to double. I think we'll be able to manage it. I think we have processes that are efficient. I think there's some economies of scale when you have that many units coming on at once. People's income don't need to be certified more than once, even though, right, there might be multiple opportunities for people. So I think it'll be okay. It'll be an increase, but no, I don't think it's going to double. I hope not. It's certainly our goal to try and keep fees manageable. That is important to us. So
I hope not to, but thank you for the clarification.
Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you. Just a quick question. How are we doing on our wait list? I mean, I understand there's this misconception in the public that like we build 10 units, 10 people come off the wait list, the top 10 people come off, and then we start in with 11 through whatever. So how are we doing are we getting the right types of things that we need to be getting for people? Are we at the right?
In terms of housing and housing size? It's hard to make a global comment because I think sometimes the wait list reflects the inventory, not completely, but if you have mostly studios and one bedrooms, you're going to attract mostly 1 and 2 person households, right? If you start to have a mass of larger units, you may pick up more larger households. So it's very hard to isolate your factors. In terms of how are you doing, you're doing great. You've got a 98% occupancy rate in the existing inclusionary units. The turnovers are handled pretty seamlessly. We work really closely, Marion and I work really closely with the developers to try and encourage a sweet spot so that more rather than fewer people will qualify for the existing units. And that helps keep that occupancy rate very high. But more units will be better. We, as many people as come off the waiting list, every Monday when somebody's cleaning out the inbox of new applications, there's more people coming in that are coming off. That's why you do a wait list update every year to try and manage the waiting list. But we did something that Marion will share with you eventually. Marion asked us to look how long people were on the waiting list who are now tenants within the last year, new tenants. It was less than a year. So what that tells you is not that the average wait is a year, but if you are motivated to move and it's the right time for you to move and you're getting on the wait list and that unit comes up close in time to when you've gotten on the waiting list and you have the right criteria, it can move pretty quickly. If you're at the top of the waiting list and you haven't had any movement, there's possibly a reason your criteria may not fit the units that are coming up. If you're a household of 6 and there aren't any 3 bedrooms, you're not going to come off of the waiting list anytime soon. If your income is $35,000, but the minimum income required is $40,000, you're not going to come off the waiting list anytime soon. So, if you are, I really believe a lot of it is, are you ready to move? Is it the right time for you? Are you not stuck in another lease that you can't get out of when the unit becomes available? And does your criteria fit? And if they do, it can move pretty quickly. If it doesn't, you can linger on the wait list for a while. So I actually think your wait list is in good shape. I think we've done a good job of both marketing and making sure that people are aware of the opportunities and not having a threshold that does not allow people to linger for years and years without any possibility of getting an inclusionary housing unit. I think we've done a better job of finding that balance. The other thing, as long as we're talking, Councilmember Burns mentioned last time I was here, we were doing an overview and you all suggested perhaps we follow up our marketing materials of specific units with a text so that people could be alerted to the fact that they'd been notified about an available unit, and we started doing that. And so that's actually been very good. So somebody gets a notice that they've been on the wait list, there's an available unit, you have the opportunity to apply for this available unit, they get a text that says, please check your email, you've been notified of an available affordable unit. And so, we're trying to reach people through many different avenues. And I think that's actually been successful. So we appreciate that input. That was really good input.
Great. If you have any more comments, I'll chime in. I think I said this last time. Spoke with a building manager that has buildings in Chicago and Evanston, and he said it's way easier to work with inclusionary units in SEPA than it is in the city. And I think having a 98% occupancy rate, I think the numbers don't lie in this case. So just thank you for the work that you all do.
You're welcome. Thank you for the partnership.
And with that, can we take a vote?
Sorry, I had a late hand here.
Oh, okay. I'm really bad on the.
No. I
checking
didn't
my-
text. I didn't text.
Okay.
It was a late hand. I just wanted to quickly say thank you for continuing to find ways to implement different ideas that you hear from us up here. I think that goes a long way, and just continuing to strengthen the partnership between our organizations. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chair Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Isles,
Aye.
Councilmember Harakaris,
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers,
Aye.
Committee Member King,
Aye.
Committee Member Murray,
Aye.
Committee Member Sweeney, Committee Member Salami.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on our agenda is item D. If I can have a motion, please.
Mr. Chair, I would move item 6D, referral to amend Title V, Chapter 9 of the City Code dealing with vacation rentals.
I'll second.
Great. Should we start it off with how does staff don't want to go through? I know we have some questions to consider, or do you want to just a quick update for folks that are following along at home?
A quick summary from Andrew San-Roman.
Hello, committee members. Andrew San-Roman, Building and Development Services Manager with the city. Just a quick summary of some of the changes that were made and what's being proposed or what's in front of you. We put together two possible amended ordinances. One of them prohibits non-owner occupied short-term rentals, and the other allows them, but with certain restrictions. In both of the amended ordinances, we amended the definition for short-term rentals. Currently, it's rentals less than 30 days. We amended that to those with a rental period of less than 1 year and furnished dwellings to better define what we're actually looking at. Some are 3 months or 6 months, so this better defines that. We also provided a definition for owner-occupied as units or groups of units that are occupied by the owner for 183 days or more, so more than half the year. That's in both amended ordinances. We also looked at the standards for license approval. I tried to take the subjectivity out of it and make them objective standards that can be reviewed administratively by staff to eliminate the subjectivity again. We also looked at raising the fees. So the renewal fees would be raised from $150 to $500. The application fee would stay at $250. We also looked at establishing an appeals process. So if somebody's vacation rental license was denied by staff, they could appeal to the Planning and Development Committee for reconsideration of that decision. And then the main difference between them would be obviously one prohibits non-owner occupied, one allows them, but with restrictions on the number of them by the number in the city as well as the number by ward.
Great. Thank you for that recap. Do we have any feedback from the committee? Councilmember Rogers.
Thank you. I think we're moving in the right direction here. This has been obviously one of the big topics that we've talked about at P&D for quite a while. I've also heard quite a bit about it in my personal or in my city email. I guess I have a couple questions for us. I noticed that there's a number by ward in terms of ownership, or I'm sorry, in terms of availability of licenses, which I believe puts it at like 35 per ward. Is there a number per owner? So, for example, could one person own 5 of them in a ward?
There's not currently a number by owner, no.
I think I would support something along those lines, because if we are limiting them, making it a little more fair to the system, so that one person isn't holding 5 licenses. We had one person who came to us recently that was applying for 3 licenses in the exact same building. And if we're going to limit the number of licenses available in the ward and effectively in the city, it seems like there should be some restrictions placed on how many a single individual can own. I know it gets a little tricky sometimes because there's LLCs involved, which have different partners and everything, but I think if there's something we can find to somewhat work with it within that, I would be very supportive of that.
Is there a number that the committee would propose?
I don't know if the committee would propose one, but I would say no more than 2, definitely, in order to limit it. I mean, I'd even go to 1. I've seen that in a lot of places, but I defer to everyone else and not just my personal preference. In terms of the ones that are non-owner occupied, we've talked about a couple different things here, about someone having to live within a certain distance to that. Is that in this proposal? And I don't remember.
Yeah, so what we added was that any non-owner occupied short-term rentals would need to have a property manager that lives within 10 miles of the city of Evanston.
Okay, so the owner doesn't have to live nearby, but we would require a property manager who would. I guess part of the question is, if we view these as valuable as a city, which I think most of us do because we are limited on hotel space within the city of Evanston, it seems like we're pricing things rather high. If you're requiring someone to have a property manager, especially if they manage one property but don't live nearby, as well as increasing a licensing fee to $500. So I think we kind of need to look at, are we trying to prohibit these by costs, or are we trying to find a solution that kind of works for people?
And just to clarify, so a non-owner occupied, the owner could be their own property manager. So if they live within 10 miles or they have a property manager within 10 miles, just to clarify that.
All right. Yeah, I mean, those are just kind of my initial thoughts on this. I'm opposed to something having to be owner occupied because I think that does make it more difficult for someone who lives in a smaller place unless they are wanting to have roommates renting with them, which is more difficult. I think in a larger property, you can either create an ADU type of a situation where maybe you're using a basement or a granny suite as part of the house. So I definitely think that we should lean more towards the non-owner occupied line. Not that it can't be owner occupied, but not making it a requirement that it be owner occupied. Those are just my general thoughts.
Go to Councilmember Isles.
Okay, my general thoughts are that I prefer the second, stricter version of it. These are great for investors, but we're working really hard to find affordable housing and to increase our housing stock and to have investors snap up smaller properties that could be profitable for Airbnbs. It's great for the investor. It's terrible for the community. in my opinion. So I prefer the ones that, to eliminate the non-owner occupied ones. I did like Council Member Rogers' idea of a limit of how many per resident, although my limit would be one. I'm less concerned about how many there are in a particular area. I think if we do go the direction of where we limit or eliminate non-owner occupied ones, it says here that, I think it said there's 74 that are licensed, and the software has identified 225 that are operating. So, those 74, if they're non-owner occupied, and we're not going to renew those, we should be giving them as much notice as possible. What happens, are we enforcing this? Like if there's 75 that have registered and there's 225 that are operating in the city, what are we doing when people don't register?
Yep. So we just acquired this software recently. And so we have been now finding those who, or citing them for a violation, those who are operating one without a license. So we've done a lot of work, obviously, until the moratorium to try and get people to apply. So currently, like you said, actually there are now 75 that are licensed short-term rentals. 12 of those are non-owner occupied.
It feels like more than that have gone through in the last couple of months at planning and development.
Well, those are the ones that were approved.
I believe you. Yeah. Okay, those are sort of my initial thoughts. I'll let other people weigh in.
Sure. Committee Member King.
I'm just curious where the number 35 per ward came from. Why that number?
To be honest with you, we were just looking at the number that we currently have and not increasing it too high, but that was something we thought the committee could discuss.
So that's the current
how many? No, that's not the current number. That's more than we currently have.
Yeah.
If you were to go with, 9 wards?
That's
so that would be
315 units.
315 units, yeah. And we estimate that there's about 225 that we found. So it would be, the numbers would have to increase to reach that 35. So that's what that was built in. But if the committee decided to, or council decided to set it at a different number, we could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Burns.
Chair, does anybody else have any comments? Because I have quite a few things to go over, and so I would delay those comments if there's somebody else.
Oh yeah, there's we have a
okay. Let's go to them first.
robust
then
discussion
I'll
going.
go
So,
last.
so Committee Member Murray.
Well, my question is, how are we enforcing the license? Are we contacting Airbnb or Verbo where they cannot register the units on their sites without paying or showing proof that they paid the registration fee?
So the hosting platforms will not require them to be licensed before they can operate on that hosting platform. We have acquired software that allows us to identify those who are operating, whether they're licensed or not. That scrapes many different platforms to see whether they're operating. And then through that, we're able to reach out to those owners and either cite them for a violation or prior to the moratorium, reach out to them to actually apply.
Okay. I asked because I'm aware of some people who do have Airbnb rentals in other cities, and they can't register the unit without showing proof that they paid for the license. So I wasn't sure if that was the case here. On another side, some people who can't afford to rent an apartment or can't rent apartments at all, they use these rental Airbnb short-term rentals, And there's also short-term rentals for Northwestern students as well. So how would this impact those people?
So that depends on what the committee or council decide to do. This would define short-term rentals as any furnished dwelling unit that's being rented out for less than a year. So that would include something for 3 months or 6 months, say for a student or a professor. They would be included in short-term rentals. So this would mainly affect whether someone's able to list a short-term rental as an owner who doesn't live there.
Committee Member Zalomi.
Yeah, I was going to bring up too this discrepancy between the number registered and the 225 listed on those websites, what was being done. But if you could give some of us an overview, how is it working? Where are the problems? What are the problems? Has anyone any licensee had their license revoked? But how is it affecting the town? Is it working without any real problems, or are there a lot of problems with some of these people?
So we haven't seen any currently licensed or previously licensed vacation rentals that have been declared a nuisance premises, for example. I think the committee, especially council members, can attest to the fact that there have been neighbor complaints about some of the vacation rentals, whether it's noise or people coming and going. But for the most part, we have not had a litany of complaints about them, no.
Okay. Then I noticed that the application fee for the non-owner occupied is $500, and then on the owner occupied it said $250.
That might just be a typo there, but the application fee is $250.
$250.
Yeah.
You know, if we just went with the or the owner occupied, could there be a lawsuit? I mean, would people sue the city over that possibility? You know,
It's possible. There have been lawsuits in other cities when they've attempted to ban short-term rentals. Some of them are based on the takings clause in the Constitution. Others have been based on the dormant commerce clause, for example, and with varying degrees of success, but there have been lawsuits against it.
okay. Yeah, I think that's, anyway, so, but they aren't spread, do certain wards have more than others? Like, are there more in Northwest Evanston, Southeast, or are they currently pretty well spread over across the city?
They are pretty well spread out throughout the city.
Okay, I think that's all.
Point out something about the numbers of people who are, we have history of having done vacation rentals, and it's dropped off. One of the things that the current ordinance has in it is if you only do one rental a year, you don't have to get licensed. And this is really we've taken that out, because how do you track the one? So it's a real easy, oh, that was just my one. And there are some people who've said no, they are not going to continue to, because it's a very circumstantial thing. Not everybody does it all the time. And I think that's what we don't have a very good handle on. Now, our assumption is if you are a non-owner occupied, you're going to rent out your unit more, because that's an investment property. So what we're really trying to understand is the difference between the two. I think there is going to be a difference. And one of the things that we heard, for example, from one of the vacation rental applicants, non-owner occupied, was like, well, you didn't give me a license, but I can just go and rent mine for more than 30 days and I'm not covered by the license, which is why we expanded the license, the time period. So we're really trying to make sure we're capturing people who are doing this, but looking at ways to evade things too, I mean, that's one of the challenges. It's a very changing market.
Councilmember Burns. I'll take a shot while Councilmember Burns unmutes.
Sorry.
Councilmember Burns, go ahead.
You want to go or do you want me to?
Go for it.
I think the first thing for me is I think it's important to kind of fully understand the legal kind of any legal concerns. I don't think I don't think the same legal concerns that may exist in other places may apply here. Just from doing some basic research on like the takings issue, I don't think they'd have a case in Evanston, because one of the things they look at is if there's, an economically viable alternative, which in Evanston that would be an economically viable long-term rental option in Evanston, which we know exists. We have a very strong rental market in Evanston, and I don't think somebody could claim that they. I think somebody, while they may claim that there's some inconveniences that come out of doing long-term rentals, I don't think somebody could say in Evanston that it's not economically viable. And then also from what I've read, it really has a lot to do with setting a strong foundation of justification, right? If you tie it, any of the restrictions or limitations or prohibitions or whatever it is on preservation, on housing affordability, et cetera, then it's more likely to hold up. And so I do think just first and foremost, it's important for our corporation counsel to either do some in-house research, to better understand those things. Because for me, I'm really struggling with understanding what the benefit of something like this is, especially when you consider our affordability and housing goals. And I don't know if staff or anybody on the committee can kind of take a shot at really describing like why we're doing this and how it benefits how it complements our affordable housing and housing goals in general. If I put my entrepreneurial hat on, I totally understand. And because it's very attractive to someone who's trying to figure out how to extract revenue from units. And I feel like I'm from housing units, and I feel like for that reason, I feel like I'm more. It would be easier for me to support someone that lived in Evanston and was using this as a way to continue to afford to stay in Evanston. That would make more sense to me. I think the thing that I would still struggle with is I have so many examples where we've been able to work with, with owner-occupied, Evanston residents who, have an upstairs, downstairs that they're renting out. It's naturally occurring affordable housing. And in many cases, those units are the reason why we've been able to keep lower income families in particular in Evanston, and to be at risk of losing any of those, whether it's 1 or 30, doesn't help, especially Evanston is not that big. 30 naturally occurring affordable units, means something here, especially in the 8092 census tract, which is mostly the 5th ward. There's some 2nd ward. You can look at the map in the strategic housing plan that we'll discuss in a bit, that shows that it's the most housing cost burden census tract in Evanston. And so another thing I'd like us to consider and explore is really not expanding these in areas where housing affordability and cost burden is an issue. We need all the available units, I think, in those areas to help support, families who want to stay here on a long-term basis. So I'll start there. The other thing is I think we should require that the use of licensed online platforms. We don't while I was talking to staff earlier, while most people use platforms, I think we should require it. There's currently no requirement, and I think we should vet these platforms to make sure that that they will easily remit local taxes, share listing data. What else do I have here in my notes? License number, address, nights booked, etc. All of that information is automated. If we can get them to use the right platforms that we have some agreements with, like this, cities have done this where they literally have like agreements with different short-term rental platforms to make sure all these things are effectuated easily, and I think we should do that. The second thing is, what are we? I guess this is a question. What are we going to do for? Well, I'll go back to that one. Okay, so next one is. This bans STR use in affordable and subsidized units, right? I just wanted to confirm that. Or the proposed language would prohibit that? That's a question for staff.
I'm sorry, I think you were breaking up just a little bit, or I didn't hear the full question.
Is there a cap or a ban on, or are we prohibiting people from establishing SCR use in affordable or subsidized units? I think I saw it in there. I just wanted to make sure.
That's correct. Yes, in 594D, it's prohibited in affordable housing, so rent restricted units or housing subsidized by the city or other affordable housing providers.
Do we have any density or like spacing language in here? You know, I've seen some language, for example, that says this whatever thing can't be. You know, we should have this actually with our. The state has this with the recreational cannabis program, where you can't have, you know, said thing, you know, a certain amount of feet away from another thing like it. And so do we have that type of language in here, any spacing language?
We did not include that language. Part of the reasoning on that was that there seems to be a desire to allow owner-occupied short-term rentals. And so to limit that based on your neighbor or a few neighbors over having one, saying that you can't have one even though it's owner-occupied, we didn't limit that, but that's open for discussion.
I think in Chicago it was that they allow by petition, and they do theirs based around registered voters, probably because it's the, you know, that you already know who's registered. I guess there may be other ways to do it through mailing addresses or something, but by petition you can prohibit these at the precinct level. So I don't know if y'all considered that at all, if you have any thoughts about it.
We did not consider the precinct level, no.
This may not be relevant if we're only allowing someone to get 1 or 2 units, but I was thinking about, you know, multi-unit buildings. So there's some cities that have said, you know, they limit it to 25%. You can only have the short-term rentals of, let's say, 25% of like a multi-unit building, or another amount, like, or 6 units, whichever is less. They'll say something like that. So it's either a percentage or it's a set amount, and whichever one is less is the one that they go with. Have you thought about that? Again, based on what I heard from Councilman Rogers and Niles, maybe it wouldn't matter here, but have you thought about that just in case we do decide to allow more than 2, let's say, one owner, property owner to have more than 2 short-term rentals of property, or I guess at all?
So one thing we did do is we incorporated in the definition for owner-occupied that someone who owns a building of up to 4 units, if they live in one of those units or operate one of those units, they could be considered owner-occupied. So that would allow for smaller residential buildings up to 4 units to be considered that. We did not take a look at a per building basis limiting the number, although if we were to limit it by ward, or citywide, the number of them as we did with the non-owner occupied option, then that would limit it for larger buildings.
Okay. Does this have like a midterm rental carve out? We talked about it, like that 31 to 180 days. Is there a carve out for that at all, or is that something you wanted directly from us on?
So we define short-term rentals as those rented for a period of less than 1 year. So any of that period from 30 to 364 days. One day to 364
Because I
days.
think there's a loophole that y'all were trying to address through that. Can you describe that again? Because I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. Was it a loophole that you were concerned about?
Absolutely. So currently the definition of short-term rental defines it as anything rented for less than 30 days. But that does not allow for, say, for example, something rented for 3 months or 6 months for a visiting professor or a student or a traveling nurse that might be renting it for a longer period of time.
Increase the fees is fine. Do we have an annual reporting requirement on this?
We have an annual inspection. What do you mean by reporting requirement?
Excuse me. So reporting like something that's annual reporting to either this committee or council. This committee, I think, will be fine to track. Excuse me, STR impacts on. It could be on housing supply, complaints, compliance. It could be any number of things.
That's not in the ordinance, but that's something we could do.
And then I think the last thing, Andrew, I talked to you about this earlier, is if we do end up, if there is strong support for owner-occupied, there are situations where I have one constituent that, lives in the ward, owns a building that she rents out, but she also occupies one of the storefronts in the building. And, we talked earlier about considering expanding how we define owner-occupied to include someone like that, because they're probably there more than the person that's there. I can't remember exactly what our language says. I think you said like it has to live here at least half of the year or something like that. I think you had a kind of simple way where we could do that by, I think you said removing dwelling and just saying unit. Could you just describe that a bit?
Absolutely, yeah. So as I mentioned earlier in the definition of owner-occupied, we said that in a building containing up to 4 dwelling units, the property could be considered owner-occupied if the owner occupies one of those units. We could take out the word dwelling and just say in a building containing up to 4 units, the primary occupant, the owner is a primary occupant of one of the units instead of dwelling units. So that would allow for, say, a business owner on a ground floor and they have 2 units upstairs that they rent out as short-term rentals if that change was decided on.
Okay, and the last thing, Chair, is again, just to repeat what I said again, I'm not sure how this. I can understand how this serves an entrepreneur, and if I was in a different city, different responsibility than the elected official who's responsible for like carrying out the goals of the city. I could absolutely understand why somebody would, want to do something like this. But I do think it's hard for me to understand why this is a good thing, particularly in areas that are already housing cost burden, which may not be the case all around the city, but certainly is in 8092. So I would like us to continue to think about creating special areas, conservation areas, overlays that include, census tracts like A092, excluding them possibly from this whole program or elements of it. I think we could talk about grandfathering in, ones that we've already licensed, and from that think about whether or not those would sunset or not. But I really need help understanding why this is a good thing in areas that are housing costs. And that's all for now, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I will echo a lot of what's been said so far. When this, for the most part, is an investment vehicle, I think for some folks that have owner occupied and maybe have like a 2 flat or a 3 flat, this is a way to supplement their income and get a foot in the door of home ownership. Like I know, a handful of people who, VRBO or short-term rental of, one of their units in their home, and in many cases it can be like a temporary thing, right? If, you have, plans in the future to, move to the upstairs, bring a family member, there's totally valid reasons for that. I think there are, in this whole kind of saga of getting to this point, I think there are questions around our legal repercussions potentially about completely banning non-owner occupied. So moving forward, I think this is great that we have 2 versions of the ordinance. I think it makes sense to keep 2 versions as we move along in the process, and keep on doing research and figuring out which makes the most sense. I think for a couple thoughts on some of the other bullet points. I think the 35 number is a little bit too high. Maybe if we land at 20, 25 units. I know a lot of the feedback I get from residents, especially with when I'm alerted of short-term rentals that aren't registered, aren't being licensed. They are very frustrated that someone is, quite obviously profiting off of our, tight housing market, and also not paying fees and taxes that could help the city. So it's a really important thing that we kind of get a hold on the licensing and, track all of these. I think we're in a unique situation, maybe not so unique, but having a university, and we have a lot of visiting professors, and so we have people who are here for longer than 30 days. And so I don't think I know exactly where we should land with, I like that we're defining short-term rental at 30 days. I'm also wondering if we should have some other way to track things that fall between the year and the 30-day rental, because I think I'm not sure exactly if we have the numbers, how often that's happening, because we do have people in and out of town for things like that. It's totally, and also like the traveling nurses, contract workers, I think those folks need housing too. And we need, we want people who work to be close to their work. So I think that's something we should kind of encourage. And then as far as the license, the decision to, if we decide to prohibit or limit the number, I think if we prohibit, I think we have to give plenty of lead time for folks to figure out what their pivot is. Many times, I've asked applicants, why don't you have a long-term rental? And I've never been completely satisfied with the answer, because there are plenty of folks that would want to rent a lot of these short-term rentals as a home. So I think it's in many ways for some folks the easy way and the most profitable. So I think it's totally reasonable that we are generous with the time frame, but if we decide to go that way, we just say, okay, you've had your fun. Now we have to change. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand it over to Council. Actually, for a first shot, I think, is it Committee Member King?
I had an earlier note, and I'm happy if
Oh.
nobody has gone first.
I think we're on second shots, so I think, yeah.
So I just had a question. So there's 74 registered right now? Sorry. There are 74 registered right now. I'm still getting used to it.
75, actually.
75 registered. And of those, there are 12 that are non-owner occupied.
Correct.
In the ordinance right now that's being proposed with the 35 per ward, is that strictly 35 for non-owner occupied units? So maximum of 35 per ward of non-owner occupied. Owner occupied is not addressed in terms of a number in the ordinance, correct?
Correct. So owner occupied there could be more than 35.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if we look at, 12 of those properties not being owner occupied, that's like 16% of the total that you've identified right now. So if we, just for hypothetical, if we extrapolated that 16 to the 225 that you've identified, that would be another 36 units in that. Perhaps there's a lot more non-owner occupied units in that 225 because they're not registering, or perhaps there isn't. Perhaps it's 16. So, if we look at that, then it kind of gets down to a number, where you have 36 plus 12, which puts you at 48 total non-owner occupied units, potentially, if the math were to work out that way. So, and even if we went up and we assumed that of those 225, 50% were non-owner occupied, that still only gets us up to 125. So I would agree. I think having a number that's 315 or whatever it is, 35 per ward, seems like more than we want. And it seems like it's perhaps more than what the demand is right now. So I wonder if we would be inviting more non-owner occupied units by setting such a high number. So, I think I would agree with what's been shared up here. I really think lowering, if we do put a cap on it, I think lowering the number significantly per ward is probably something for non-owner occupied units that I would be in favor of. I don't know what that number is, but 35 certainly to me, just looking and doing the math, seems to be high. Just seems to be high based on kind of what we know about what's already registered and what we would anticipate seeing with the short-term rentals there.
And just to clarify what the intention was with these numbers as well, it would include owner occupied. So let's say, for example, there were already 35 owner occupied, then you couldn't have any non-owner occupied. That limit has already been reached, if that makes sense.
So, okay. So, because it says the number of non-owner occupied short-term rentals, so that's just embedded within the owner occupied units. Is that
So
right?
there's no limit on owner occupied. So there could be 40 in a ward, there could be 50, but when we're then examining non-owner occupied, so we get an application for a non-owner occupied, if there are already 35 in that ward, then we wouldn't be able to approve
You're not
that
gonna approve it.
application.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yep. Hopefully that's not too complicated, but.
Councilmember Rogers.
Just two really kind of quick questions here. Do we have any more applications that have come in that we've not seen move through the process yet?
So we closed down the application. It's an online application, so we shut it down. So we can't receive anymore.
Yeah, so nothing though is in the pipeline waiting to come to P&D, everything, we've heard everything that made it in by September 8th.
Nothing's waiting to go to P&D. There were a couple that were owner occupied and awaiting approval. That's why it went from 74 to 75, but those are whittling down.
All right. In terms of owner occupancy, I think we need to have really kind of strict guidelines if that's the way people want to go, and we can't start fudging it around a little bit, because then it doesn't mean owner occupied anymore. So I think if we're going to put in a rule that says owner occupied, which I do not support, I think we need to be very strict on what that means and not be making up new rules to allow things to happen that we're classifying under that. One last question. This is, I'm not advocating this, I'm not proposing this, it's a question. What is the current tax rate that we get on a short-term rental? Is there a tax rate that we currently get?
There is. They pay the hotel motel tax, which is 7.5% of gross receipts. And to address, I think Councilmember Hadakatis had mentioned earlier about receiving fees and taxes from those that are not licensed. The hosting platforms generally collect that tax, whether they're licensed with us or not. So over the last few years, in 2023, we collected over $300,000 in that tax. In 2024, it was a little over $400,000. This year, we're on track for somewhere between $450,000, $480,000. So it's gone up a little bit each year, but it's 7.5%.
Okay. And not that I expect you to know this, because I'm asking you a question outside of what your expertise is. I don't know if anybody here can answer it for me, but it's just kind of a question as to what do we bring in hotel taxes outside of this on an average year? And I don't know that any of you know that.
We don't
but
have
that's
that
a question
number.
I would like to put out if there's somebody who can tell us that piece of information to sort of see. As I mentioned earlier, we are short on hotel rooms in Evanston. We have a major university here. We have big events. When people cannot stay in Evanston, they stay in Skokie, they stay in downtown Chicago, they stay elsewhere, and their dollars lots of times stay elsewhere as well. So I'd just be curious as to what type of an economic driver is this for us in relation to, is it really supplementing hotels, or is it just a blip in the radar on that? And that's, again, just a question that we can maybe have for the next time this comes before any of us.
Yeah, we could talk with finance and the collector's office.
So in our current 2026 projected revenue, I find the municipal hotel tax is $2.35 million. So it was the same adopted as last year. I don't see the actual number, but
yeah, I'm just curious because, I mean, the numbers you were throwing out were close to $500,000 in that. So just curious as to what that is. Again, I don't expect an answer now.
okay. Committee member Zalomi.
I like the idea of limiting the number by owner as long as it wouldn't result in a lawsuit or a problem, but I think that makes sense, that, some investors just wouldn't buy up a lot of places to service short-term rentals.
So I do not see any lights. Question for staff. This has been a really good discussion. I think we've hit all questions that you all had for direction. Do you feel comfortable with the amount of feedback you folks have gotten this evening to proceed?
I think so, yes. I think the question would just be how you would like us to proceed if we're bringing this back to HCDC or amending both ordinances, or how would you like us to proceed?
I think we can kind of take a straw poll and maybe nod our heads. I would personally like to see us proceed with both versions for now until we get more guidance from our legal department. Does that seem like the prudent choice to move forward with both versions for now?
To bring them back here? Or to
We're
move-
not that far. We're just deciding to keep both versions for now, moving forward.
That's fine.
I think that sounds fine.
I think there's some tweaks, but
Yeah. And then I think timing wise, if staff can share when our next meeting is here. Okay. And this I'll throw out to our other, as council members, we're going to see this at least 2 more times at least. How do the non-council people on the committee feel about moving this forward to planning and development? Because I think that's the next, is it that the next committee this would go to?
Sorry, there's a little discussion.
I think.
One moment. He's asking where this would go after HCDC.
HCDC goes straight to council.
It goes straight to council. Okay. I see Councilmember Burns in the queue.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I'm not sure if you were saying something different, but I think it's important that this come back to HCDC at least one more time. And the fact that it goes directly to council, I think it's a good thing. It's just it's a more streamlined process directly to being reviewed by the full body. What I would like to see is, I've presented some questions, some ideas, some research we still need to do. I think we're all on the same page about the legal research. I think that's important, incredibly important, so we know, what our limitations are. But I think we should bring all of that back to maybe the next HCDC committee. I work with staff on that. We have we have a lot of referrals to HCDC, a lot on our future agendas, but we can find a way to bring this back and have more information for folks at that point.
Thank you. Councilmember Isles.
I've got a couple questions, or one question, one comment. When does the moratorium end?
December 5th-ish. September 8th was when it was enacted, so
3 months. Yeah.
3 months. It was 90 days, but it's not exactly 3 months. So roughly somewhere around December 6th, 7th, something like that.
So maybe we can get it to council at the beginning of December, first meeting in December.
One meeting in December, it's December 8th.
Okay.
So
right about the time the moratorium ends. The other thing, comment is a few of us mentioned sort of what's the legal exposure to eliminating non-owner. So if you could come back with that next time.
Okay, now, right now, this isn't on the current list of agenda items for HCDC, so are we saying we want to bring it back to HCDC?
Councilmember Burns said he did.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because the committee has a pretty full schedule. You've got Housing for All at the next meeting, as well as this one we haven't gotten to, and you also have the 2026 HUD action plan, and I'm going to turn this over to Marion for everything else. Is that?
I mean, I don't have a strong opinion about it. I'm just
Right.
pointing out that Councilmember Burns mentioned it was important to him.
Just to provide some context to the committee, we probably have the heaviest agendas that we ever had for this committee for November and December, because you have policy items and grant items that are colliding. Usually we try to stagger them. So November, December meetings are usually occupied fully by grants. You have the action plan, and then in December you have the action plan, the allocation, the applications. This year, on top of that, there is the housing for all that's coming back, potential IHO updates, and then potential additional items on top of that. So it would be,
okay.
It might require a special meeting. We were already in that situation without this.
When it does come back, whether that's in council or to this committee, can you please add sort of what our legal exposure would be if
We will certainly ask
choose
about
the
that,
option?
yes. Mhm.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rogers.
Oh, no, I was just going to raise the issue of the moratorium ceasing sometime around the beginning of December. We always, of course, could reserve the option to extend that
Extend
by
it at
30 days or something, but I really don't want us to. The idea behind the 90 days was that we kind of lit a fire under ourselves to move forward. And unfortunately, with a committee that meets just once a month, we've already eaten through half our time almost, or close to it. It is important to have these discussions, but it's also important to move it forward so that we know exactly what we're doing when we're doing it. And even by adding an extra 30 days with only one meeting in December, that really pushes us into whether we'd be able to make it in the 30 days.
I think that's a good point. With this, I had hoped we would get kind of to the bottom of where we all kind of had agreement in one meeting. I think it's definitely going to take one more to get a fully fleshed out ordinance that's moving towards consensus. I think, well, there's two thoughts. I think we have the option to extend the moratorium. I'd rather have it, as long as we're not having more non-owner occupied vacation rentals trickle into the P&D. I'm fine with extending the moratorium while we figure it out. The other option that I just, because I wasn't sure where this would, because a lot of this discussion came from P&D. My question to staff is, and this might help us kind of speed the process up, would this be appropriate to refer this as a discussion item in P&D to get, because eventually, ideally when we have these boards and commissions, we come to a consensus with community members and a good portion of our colleagues on council, and then we hope that when it gets to council, we've talked to our colleagues and have something that's pretty close to fully baked, and we can just move forward. This has a lot of moving parts, so I think it's important for us to get feedback from some of the folks that also co-referred this. My question for staff is, would it be appropriate to have this as a discussion item at P&D? Or is it possible even?
I think it's possible, but I honestly think it would be best to get it to the full council. I think that's one of the challenges. We get only certain members of the council, and we kind of rediscuss everything. So I think Councilmember Burns pointed out that it might be the most expeditious and get everybody all thinking about it at the same time if it were to go straight to council.
And we wouldn't necessarily have to vote on it that day, too.
No,
and so,
I'm thinking of what happened with the RLTO, for example. That didn't go through any place all at once, but it went to city council directly from this committee. And I think if we start changing that, then we're going to get people saying, why does this committee refer anything straight to council then? We'll put everything back through P&D, which is going to be a nightmare with the grants.
Fair enough. See, that's what I get for, stream of consciousness there.
And
So,
just a point of information, if we're getting this in front of all the co-referrers, that is the entire city council.
touche. Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, so the moratorium, when does that end again?
It ends in early December.
December 7th,
In our first council meeting in December is when?
December 8th, the next day.
Okay. Because no matter what, we may have to extend the moratorium because it's not a given that we'll be ready to. We'll need 2 readings. We'll need to vote on it. This will come to introduction on. I guess is the idea to get it at. So the idea would be to get this at council next month. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
And then have for introduction and then for action in December.
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay.
So,
I think we can. I don't necessarily know if we need. I guess the biggest thing is this is the committee that has either housing experts or people who have enough experience with housing where they qualify to sit on this committee. And I think it's important we don't send kind of half-baked. This really isn't baked. I'll say because staff did their part, but in terms of we haven't really provided, I don't think, enough direction in order to send this over having contributed in a meaningful way. And so it kind of negates the whole point of these type of committees. And so, I'd like to work with staff to figure out how we can make that possible. And if we can't, then we can, we can forward it to council. But I do think it's important that this committee have an opportunity to provide some recommendations that staff can forward to council after receiving some of the, responses from questions and different requests that we've had today. And I don't think we're going to necessarily figure out how to do that in this meeting, but I'd like to at least try. And, I think it's important. And if we have to hold a special meeting, it would just be one item. I think we can, and that's something that's worth considering. This is important. So I'll just put that out there.
Would a special meeting be something that the committee would consider?
I've personally never been in a special meeting. I don't know. Just kidding. I'm up for it. I think this is, this is something that's been kind of a thorn in our side and something that I think community members really want us to land on something that's not what we, our current situation is not tenable going forward. So I think there's definitely urgency here. I would be up for a special meeting, especially if we were, I think we've gotten really good feedback. I think, typically with these bigger things, usually you need 2 good discussion sessions to really hone in on what, because it is very broad. It's you start looking at it and staff did a great job of really giving us 2 options and pointing out the kind of the decision points. But I think I would be up for a special meeting. I guess take a straw poll here. Sure, and I think we can be, especially if we have a one item, and maybe if staff has other things that would help ease our burden at the other meetings, we could hear those too. So, Councilmember Rogers.
I would just say I think a special meeting would be beneficial because I'm just going to note for the record it is 9:25 and we've not gotten to the main topic yet this evening. And so by perhaps having a meeting in a couple weeks that could allow further discussion on that as well as further discussion on this and no other issues, that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have a lot of procedural, things that we have to do in this committee, especially with the grant season coming. I think, does that provide enough guidance for staff then? I think I think the consensus for everyone who's been following along is that we will have a special meeting to have a second crack at this. And then we will, be Councilmember Isles.
Can we schedule that?
That was what I was going to ask.
Is that what you're huddling about? Okay.
Yeah.
I have also never been in a special meeting, so I'm very curious.
What is a special meeting?
I don't know, but I have high hopes.
It's really special. There's never been one before.
Except for 24 hours ago, I was sitting in the exact same seat in a special meeting.
One of the, we have a lot of meetings in October and November.
It's a busy time of year. That's
How does anybody feel about October 30th? There is a city school liaison meeting at 5:30, but there appears to be no other major meeting that night. That is a Thursday.
I'm on the committee. I'm used to 7 hours of meetings at night, so let's go for it.
What is the availability of anybody else on the 30th?
If it's okay with me.
I cannot, because I'm not out of the country, but I'm just one person here. There are a lot of other people.
This is for vacation rental.
I think I proposed that it be for both.
Yeah, we can.
Because we're not going to have unless we're staying till midnight tonight, we're not going to have a robust discussion on housing for all. And if we're
Okay.
going to have a special meeting where we discuss this, I would prefer we also include that as part of that discussion as well.
I don't want to throw off the decision now on when this would be, but I just want to flag that based on the conversation later for Housing for All, depending on where we go, the timing of that will be important. And having the conversation on Thursday could work very well depending on where we go. And it could be providing an update to everyone before then will be obviously impossible. So I just want to throw out that if we're trying to do both, we might want to think about both of those as well.
Could I propose what is the availability on the city schedule for the 4th, which is 2 weeks from tonight?
I have a meeting on the 4th at
Okay.
Robert Crown
Okay.
with.
Yeah, that's a
Alternate
joint
Eastman.
ward meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if we could consider, there are a lot of things on Tuesdays. If we could look at some of the other days, I'm sure nobody's interested in Friday, which is always open.
Saturday mornings I'm available too.
What about Wednesday, the 19th? Well, Councilmember Isles, you have office hours.
Office hours that have moved a lot.
A million times. 26th? There doesn't appear to be anything on,
Isn't that a Sunday?
the day before Thanksgiving. That's just what everybody wanted to do. Sorry about that. You can see how good I am at planning.
What about November 5th? You said the 4th, but yeah.
Sure.
November 5th.
November 5th is my birthday. I can think of nothing else I would rather do than come to a special meeting. It's awesome. It's also Guy
I
Fawkes Day.
came to a comp plan meeting on my birthday.
Yeah, no,
so I don't
I'm
wanna
not
hear it from
complaining.
you.
I'm like, this is exciting. Yeah, I'm wonky. It's, yeah.
Councilmember Burns has his hands up. I don't know if he's trying to weigh in.
Councilmember Burns.
Yeah, are we thinking not discussing strategic housing or housing for all, I should say, tonight and instead discussing at the next meeting, or is everybody still up for discussing housing for all this evening?
I think we're going to do both. We're going to start the discussion.
I think we should probably get into that, and we can spend some time tomorrow getting all the, because Tuesday would be good for me, 19th wouldn't, so it's going to take some time to, coordinate calendars, but we can start working on that tomorrow. I do think it's important to get to housing for all if we're going to do that.
Okay, we want to move forward, and we can do meetings by sorting out that by emailing. Maybe we can send doodle polls or something if need be. That
Great.
make sense?
Yeah, that that works for us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to item E, please. Can I have a motion relative to item E?
Mr. Chair, I would move item 6E, discussion on the Housing for All draft plan.
I'll second it.
All right. Yuri, you have the floor.
Good evening, Chair, committee members, council members. I acknowledge the time. I will be as efficient as possible, and also want to arm you with as much information and analysis that staff has done since the last meeting. At a high level, let me just make sure that the clicker's working. Perfect. At a high level, there's 4 things that we're looking for from the committee this evening. One is I will speak to staff recommendations and looking to the committee individually. There are a series of them. I believe there's 14. How you'd like us to move on those. Should we move ahead with that? Should we not? Should we move ahead in a modified way? Obviously, any other recommendations are fair game, and want to make sure there's clarity and direction for staff on how to move forward on any other issues. And then, as we were sort of just discussing related to another agenda item, but want to go over the current timeline for a draft update and this committee and council to look at the plan and make sure that we're on the same page and staff has clear direction on how to move forward along those lines. So just want to tee that up, and then we'll go forward. So for consistency, partially for some new committee members and also for folks who are going to be reviewing this later on, I've included a series of slides that we've included for a while. I'm not going to go into detail on each of them, but I just want to acknowledge that we're anchoring to the same process we've been doing for the past year and a half. Housing for All fills in a gap of other strategic plans that the city has focused on housing. It's looking at 10 years, looking at needs, priorities, and focused on action. And there's a number of elements that are driving this initiative. There's a significant number of Evanston residents that have challenges. Bold strategic action is needed. It needs to be efficient and impactful. The city can't do it alone. We need to collaborate. We need more funding, and a lot is at stake in this process. And then we've identified, this is on the website, and we've discussed this in the committee, but things that we're hopeful that this plan will not be, and elements that this plan will be, mainly focused on kicking things into action and focused on implementation as soon as the plan is approved by council. In terms of the process, it started in 2023 when council set the goals, and most recently the draft plan was released on September 12th. Feedback was communicated to the city in the last month plus, and according to the current timeline, direction from this committee would be given to staff to update the plan. That updated plan will be provided in advance of the next HCDC meeting. That would be the recommendation provided to council. And again, won't go over all the elements, but public process to date, the key component most recently was the release of the plan prior to the last meeting, and a significant amount of public feedback that we're excited to share with you our initial analysis of this evening. So let's jump into the community feedback. So we focused our community feedback around a feedback form that was available online and also a paper form in 6 different locations at the city from September 12th to October 12th. It was available in English and Spanish. There were other outreach that supported it and encouraged folks to participate. And we got over 675 responses to the survey, to the feedback form. The feedback form included 3 components. One was very brief, focused on the objectives. The second was demographics. And then the third was optional everything is optional, of course, but the third one is you can submit, and then you also could answer more questions about the following 27 strategies. A fair number of people provided answers to those next 27 strategies, which means that the input was very robust, which was great to see and very helpful. So the next few slides are basically highlighting who we heard from, not the content yet, and how that relates to the actual makeup of Evanston. And the most important thing that I want to highlight is not necessarily the individual numbers, but when it's darker orange, that's folks who are underrepresented in the survey in comparison to their actual makeup of Evanston, and the darker blue is overrepresented. And so while we had a robust response that was relatively well represented in a variety of areas, there are definitely areas that were underrepresented, and that will follow through into our analysis. So if we just sort of go quickly through these next slides, you'll see that renters are underrepresented and owners are overrepresented, particularly those that have a mortgage. If you can just click again on the slide, that would be great. Thank you. In terms of income, lower income households were underrepresented, and higher income households or underrepresented and higher income households are overrepresented. As you can see both with these two slides, the cost burden that we've discussed from the previous report is disproportionately with the groups that are underrepresented. I think the city did a good job in reaching out to lots of folks. We can always do better. And it is common that renters and folks with lower income are participating less in the process, and we want to make sure that we're accounting for that. Same thing in terms of race and ethnicity. White respondents are overrepresented, and most folks of color are underrepresented. In terms of wards, the 4th, 6th, and 9th ward are more underrepresented, and the 6th and 7th wards are more overrepresented. In terms of bedrooms, smaller units are underrepresented, larger units are overrepresented, and household size pretty similarly as well. And in terms of age, younger folks underrepresented, older folks overrepresented. So why are we sharing this? One, it's important to just note who we heard from. Two, we basically will be showing the results of the feedback form along the objectives and the strategies in the raw data, the unweighted data, and then we also did a calculation where we reweighted both based on income and based on tenure, which are the two main areas that cost burden is disproportionate, and reweighted it in comparison to the actual distribution in Evanston. Not 50-50, let's say, between renters and owners, but 56-44% based on the distribution of renters and owners. So to start off, just at a very high level, the color coding on the right matches up the graphs that we shared in the plan as well. You can see that the three objectives, preserve, create, and protect, are generally positively reviewed and supported by the population that responded. The blue overall agree is a combination of the two agree components together. So you can see 3 out of 4 folks are supporting the preserve, well over 50% on create, and same thing, over 2/3 protect. And you can see the distribution on the right. As we move forward with the next few slides, to simplify, we're just focusing on overall agree. Again, all this data is available in the packet, but we would be here until tomorrow morning just going through that part. So what we're going to show in the next few slides, there's a little bit of funky color coding, but hopefully this will be relatively straightforward. This is the same information as this slide, overall agree, across the 3 objectives. However, the second column from the left is unweighted. That's the same. Then there's reweighted by tenure, like we just discussed. Then the change between the unweighted and the tenure. And then the same thing with income and change. And the color coding is basically in the top right-hand corner. It's probably hard to see, but The more green is more support, and the more red is more opposition. That's in terms of the responses themselves. And then the color coding with the sort of teal and orange is the change. And as you can see, there's substantial support originally in the unweighted, but if you look at the weighted tenure and income, the support goes up in a relatively meaningful way. So for tenure, you have 2/3 and more of folks supporting the 3 objectives, and same thing based on income. The support, again, is pretty strong unweighted, but it becomes even stronger when that's taken into account. And so we're going to do the same thing for all 27 strategies. I'm just going to point out a couple, and then we can move on. So these are the 10 strategies under the preserve category. As you can see, originally support is pretty strong. There are a few categories, instituting a housing impact fee, and I believe it's transfer of development rights that are have lower support. As we reweight them by tenure and income, there becomes a meaningful difference in an upward direction. There's none of them that are in a lower direction. And also, housing impact fee and transfer of development rights, neither of them are red because they don't have a majority that are against. They just have folks who are saying, I don't know, or no opinion. And so there's not a majority in support or in opposition. The next one, if you can click again. Thank you. In terms of create, there are 7 strategies for create, very similar. The one instance where the change was downward towards opposition is the 2.2 partner with religious institutions. It's down 1% from 73 to 72, not a meaningful change, but I want to highlight that there was one area where that took place. But again, in general, strong support in the unweighted, and then the support increases when you reweight. For example, 2.4, the Inclusionary Housing Ordinance, looks like there might be not a significant amount of support. It's under 50%, but reweighted is 57%. And then there's 10 more under the protect category. The support was initially probably the strongest of all of them in comparison to the others, where you can see there's a majority and 2/3 in all of them already. And then it goes up substantially when you account for tenure or income, noticing just cause actually goes up 18% for income, from about 50% to 68%. So staff's not recommending to disregard the actual responses, those are the actual responses and the percentages, nor to, but basically to look at all of this together and to understand that the responses were very valuable, and that with this reweighting, we're looking at it in a different approach to focus on folks who are underrepresented and those who have the most cost burden, which is really the focus of the plan. So there are other components that staff is looking at as well. The results were finalized on April 12th, April 13th, actually, when the day after it ended. It's I said April, I mean October. We were only 8 days after that, and there were over 940 open-ended responses. Don't want to pretend that we have a mastery of what all those responses were in that period of time, but our initial analysis shows that there's concern over property taxes, interest in terms of support or opposition to density and upzoning, concerns around housing costs and rental assistance, sustainability and public transit, and we look forward to diving into that further and incorporating this further into the next update. Additionally, we've received public comment and written feedback from individuals, organizations. The Land Use Commission discussed the plan, and the Preservation Commission as well. In the packet, there's links to their discussions. There are a couple articles written about it, and staff who were staffing those can also is in the process of putting together some summaries as well. So that is the public feedback focused currently on the feedback form. And then next I want to jump into staff recommendations, which is we'll just jump right in, is really focused on continuing and improving the evidence-based components of the plan, rooting it in best practice. We've incorporated community feedback previously, but there's been a substantial amount that we just discussed, and making sure that we're incorporating that as well, and really continuing to focus on those that are disproportionately cost burdened. So I'm going to highlight the 14 staff recommendations. Again, at a high level, the idea was not to do a deep dive tonight, but was to get direction from the committee. If all of these are of interest to include in the plan, staff will move that forward, and then you will see that in the next update. So they include adding a section about understanding our community, and diving deeper into what the different income brackets are, student housing needs, senior housing needs, households with children, et cetera. They're all referenced, they're all important parts of the plan, but expanding it further, digging into that detail a little bit more. And then also the plan the plan touches on household growth, but focuses on the household growth mostly for seniors. And obviously there's going to be projections over time for households should be included holistically, not just for the senior population. One example I wanted to include was student housing. The quiz on this is in about 5 minutes, so please study this chart. The main point of this chart is that students' housing needs in Evanston includes a variety of different situations. And this is one area that we would be looking to explore and include more information. And so, for example, there are students who live in Evanston who attend Northwestern. There are students who live in Evanston who attend many other institutions. And if they're undergraduates or graduate students, and depending on which ones of those, they have different housing requirements, housing needs. They're in town for different periods of time. Some are doing online learning. There are also a lot of students who live elsewhere, who live elsewhere, who attend school in Evanston, which is very relevant and important, but it is another example of just the lots of diverse housing situations. And so this section would not look like this. That would not be very helpful, but it would try to cut through this and help describe some of these differences so that we can better account for student housing needs. The third staff recommendation is looking at the different takeaways that are highlighted in the plan. Currently, the takeaways on the left are the 8, I believe, that are included in the plan. The proposed version streamlines it a bit. The 3 in blue on the left would be incorporated together into the 1 in blue on the right. It would not be taking away any of those components. The data would still remain, but they're intertwined a little bit more, and wanted to recommending to streamline. We would remove the student section here actually and include it in the previous section we discussed to discuss the diverse housing needs which overlap with other housing needs rather than a sort of a struggle or a need. And then adding missing middle housing, which is discussed repeatedly in the plan but not really articulated here. So this is the direction that staff recommends in terms of key takeaways. Again, all of these are open for your comment and addition or subtraction. Additional components are adding maps and charts for greater readability. There's a lot of census tables that not everyone has memorized each census tract and knowing where it is in the city. This should hopefully help for readability and understanding where, for example, in this one, where the greater cost burden is by census tract, with the darker values being greater cost burden. Same thing with charts. So this chart could be one way that the plan could better articulate what housing cost burden is by household income and by tenure. Lower incomes are on the left with higher cost burden. Higher incomes are on the right, lower cost burden. It could also be shown as broken down in a different way, seeing how renters and owners and overall play into the mix. And here's just another example as well, highlighting the significant differences between tenure and cost burden. We're hoping that this plan leads to action, and sometimes these types of graphs and maps can help generate more action than a bunch of numbers on the page. Additional ones include, so we've been sort of going section by section. In the goals section, better connecting the plan's overall goals to the goals of each individual objective. There are a bunch of numbers and goals attached overall to the plan, and showing our work to show how those big numbers are created more clearly and articulately in the plan. Additionally, in the strategy section, staff proposes that we consolidate the strategies. Right now, there are 27 strategies that have a variation in terms of scale or scope. Some are pretty large and could have subcategories. Other ones are pretty specific policies or initiatives. And the recommendation, we'll show an example in a second, of nesting those and adding an additional layer for more focus. Additionally, it will be a way to highlight initiatives that advance multiple strategies. Right now, they're sort of all individual, and with this nesting, there's another opportunity there. And finally, with a variety of initiatives, it provides multiple ways to achieve the same strategy depending on funding situations, policy, landscape, instead of just a strategy being off the table for a period of time. There's much more opportunity to be nimble and shift. So for example, right now, these two strategies are included in two different areas, and one direction would be under preserve, to have a strategy that's around preserving homes for low and middle income households, and having a couple initiatives around streamlining the permitting process and streamlining our current rehab programs to help solve that. The permitting process, for example, would probably show up under other strategies as well, because there's a lot of benefits that can apply to a bunch of different areas. And another example under create would be having an overarching strategy of preserving new housing on tax-exempt properties with a focus on low and middle-income households. Currently, there are a couple strategies that talk about city-owned property or faith-based organizations. There's also an opportunity to be a little bit more specific about redeveloping transit agency-owned properties and including them all together in one nested strategy. Moving quickly along, three other components that we're recommending in terms of strategies are adding three specific strategies around expanding funding, collaboration, data tracking, and reporting. Those are all key components in the plan already, but our recommendation is to put it at this level so that it's much more clear and highlighted as a through line. Additionally, adding a table summarizing all the strategies and the initiatives, and clearly identifying the vision and objective alignment, what the income brackets that are served, and what the alignment is with community feedback, really summarizing that for your review and also for plan implementation. Additionally, adding additional case studies that specifically highlight the relevance to Evanston. We have a couple in the plan, and as we refine the plan and focus on certain strategies and initiatives, look forward to building that out further. In terms of the implementation section, as we discussed in a previous meeting, it intentionally was a little bit thin as we were moving forward and building this out. Now is the time to build that back up. And so providing more detail based on initiative, which is the term staff's using for that next category below strategies. And additionally, adding the lead and supporting departments by initiative. That was the plan all along. But again, if we're refining our strategies, this is the time to include that. In terms of oversight, including more specifics around frequency and the audience for regular reporting. And finally, more clearly tying in the current programs to the plan objectives. They're currently in the appendix and organized by objective, but the clarity around how they align maybe on the strategy level would likely be helpful for a variety of reasons as well. So as a reminder, the current timeline as discussed, working sort of skipping the first step for a second into the second one, is the next committee meeting is scheduled for this committee to provide a recommendation to City Council. Following that timeline, staff would commit to providing an update to the plan a week beforehand rather than like the Friday beforehand to make sure enough time was given. If we're going to move forward with this timeline, that's one of the pieces that we're looking for from you. If we're looking to adjust that timeline, we would appreciate the clarity around what that would look like so staff can prepare whatever updates are needed to move that process forward. And so these are the 4 items again as a reminder. We would love direction on these 14 staff recommendations, any and all committee recommendations beyond that, and discussing the timeline moving forward in terms of the draft plan update and next meetings. I'm happy to answer any questions and excited to take down any notes and recommendations.
One quick thing off the top, before I forget to talk about it. I like that we consolidated the objectives. I think it was the objectives. I think it is, and I know we're trying to be concise with the language, but I think it's incredibly important to, we are losing our racial and socioeconomic diversity, but I think in particular it's really important to note that our Black population, historic Black population is dwindling, and that's, I'm sure you all can wordsmith that better than I just did, but I think that's important to keep in that. I know the intent is there, but I think it's important. It'll be important for residents to see that there spelled out specifically. So
we'll probably end up wanting to go through sort of like a quasi like straw poll or something from the committee, but just to clarify, the content wouldn't be removed. So your suggestion, your direction would be keeping it at that key takeaway level to make sure that it's highlighted.
Yes, at the highlight level. Okay. Yeah, because I know, like I said, I know that those actions aren't removed, but to have it, I think front and center is important for people.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. Either with any, you must be tired. I don't see any lights, any feedback. Like I will say, this has been like I've enjoyed at every iteration of this, especially digging into it was great to see that the feedback shows that we're exactly on the right track here. A lot of the things that are in this document are things that people said you should be doing when we were having our Envision Evanston meetings, and I've been telling folks, like, yes, we're not just upzoning. There's a bunch of things that go hand in hand with this, and so it's great to see these spelled out and having them in this document. Any? Committee members, Zalomi.
Well, I just like that that all the objectives were specific, and not just generalized, and of course, the more specific you can be, the better, and then a better timeline. Now, I certainly agree, as a landlord, I am opposed to just cause on all levels. I cannot afford, to pay my tenants 3 months' rent or whatever it was, to move if it wasn't for certain causes. So I'm certainly not in favor of prioritizing that or moving up the timeline on that. I guess the question I had about the decrease in the Black population, what are the causes? Is it affordability? Is it that there are fewer households or smaller households? I mean, do we have any information on what the causes would be and not just affordability?
I don't want to pretend to be an expert on on that's a larger question, but I would say that from the research we've done, the data we've included, there's obviously a strong correlation between race and income, and the cost burden is particularly high for lower incomes, and so that correlation seems to be particularly strong, and so that's a key component that we're at least trying to focus on from a housing standpoint.
I think the cost burden map, I think the Fifth Ward census tract is particularly high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And my rental unit is in the Fifth Ward, and I keep my rents very affordable. I've got 4-bedroom units, and they're very affordable. So I want to keep them that way too. But I mean, we're dealing with the history of this country when it comes to race and economics, and hopefully we can address it to some extent. But we're not, as the plan says, this is not to correct all the issues of affordability in Evanston. That is certainly beyond the scope. But I guess some of the questions one question I had on the fund to help people, whether it's for rents or whatever, where would that money come from? I mean, I don't want to, it's late, so at our special meeting, I can go through some of the other questions that I have. But I just like the fact that these objectives and were just pretty specific.
Thanks. I can quickly address the funding component. Definitely is to be determined at this point in time, but the main goal would be seeking out new funding that would not be taking funding from other places the city is already spending or requiring the city to raise other fees or taxes in order to pay for it. The first opportunities and avenues would be all the other options in terms of leveraging current dollars, seeking new grants, looking to philanthropy, all other options to maximize affordability. Again, we don't want to raise costs of affordability to help maintain or address affordability. That would be a sort of an odd cyclical approach.
Councilmember Burns.
I'll just make some brief comments, but Lori, I'll work with you. I like the direction we're going in, especially in trying to prioritize objectives, consolidate where appropriate. I'd love to spend some time, offline to provide more feedback, as you go through that process. But I think generally, I support all the direction that staff is taking and all the recommendations that you talked about today. I think the main thing that's important to me is that sometimes I think, actions can be kind of misunderstood as strategy. And, a definition that I found, or way to think about it, is like strategy is the bridge between goals and actions. It's the logic of how you win or succeed, not a list of things we do. And so I think and while there's a little bit of strategy and logic in the plan, it was probably hard to put a lot of it in there because there was, 24 or so different objectives, which is why I think it's important that we find a way to kind of prioritize and consolidate. But I think that's the piece that we need to strengthen, because we have a list of ideas, right? We have some really good ideas. We kind of know what we want, all the different things we could do. We need to spend more time understanding what is most appropriate in Evanston. And, starting off with, you can start off with any objective, but really looking at it and thinking about what's the theory of change for it? What are the barriers and tools of the city that the city can control? We need to check alignment with existing programs to make sure there's no conflicts. There's a strategic framework that I think we need to apply to whatever objectives we end up with to make sure that we're really mapping out the way that we're going to achieve these things and understanding like what is the most appropriate thing to move forward in Evanston and why. That's the piece that I think we haven't arrived at that point yet, and I'd like to work with staff to try to do that between meetings. But I think the recommendations that you provided allow for that to happen. So I appreciate all your work on this, and I look forward to scheduling that meeting when we can. Thank you.
Committee Member Sweeney.
Thank you. What occurred to me hearing both of these presentations, your excellent presentation and the one before, is that there's a finite amount of space currently now in Evanston and a huge housing need. And so I think these last two issues, have the fact that they're going to a special meeting and the same special meeting, is a wonderful coincidence. It seems to me that it might be a really good idea. We can never tell people what they're going to do with their property, but the thoughts of available housing being rented to short-term rentals for, and frankly, maybe a lot more income than a person could get from a long-term rental. It just seems to me there's available space, but yet some of it is being utilized maybe in a way that would be more favorable, especially since there's such a need for housing for all income areas. And my second comment was perhaps the egress of Black or people of color leaving would have also something to do with the size of the family, as well as affordability.
Committee Member King.
Excuse me. I as well, this is my first time seeing the presentation, and I think it's really well done. I think the plan is really well done. It's very thoughtful. Lots of really good work gone into this, and I was really excited to see the suggestion of the consolidation of the strategies. When I was reading the draft, it felt more of like a menu of possibilities as opposed to specific things that we want to move on. So I would perhaps, in addition to the consolidation, since you have the data, and that was really great to see that you have the data on the specific strategies themselves and what the respondents said, if there's like some prioritization that can go along with that. I think that sometimes with these plans, they can just get so overwhelming that they become this kind of universal, here's every possible thing we could do. And I think if we focus on the things that are either fundamental to achieving our objectives, like, for example, in the preserve section, like we know how many inclusionary housing ordinance units there are, inclusionary housing units there are. We know how many of them are going to expire in the next 10 years. So from my perspective, that's a priority. Like that would be a big priority in figuring out that. So, and I think like other fundamental stuff like revising the zoning code, like where does that fit in the laundry list of things we have listed? So I think, you using the data and, putting more, thought into like how you might prioritize specific strategies that are more likely to get us to where we want to be, whether it's the 3,000 to 5,000 units or, you know, the anti-displacement strategies or whatever it may be. I think that would be something that I think would make it a really strong document and something that would be responsive, I think, to what the community has said that they are really in support of and really driving it. And I've got other comments, but I'll save them for the special meeting.
I just wanted to add that we've been working with a national organization that we're alumni of a housing cohort that provides some pro bono assistance on plans like this, and we were looking to find out which plans do the best job. These are specifically strategic housing plans, do the best job of articulating impact by each category, initiative, and strategy. And their scan came back with nothing super impressive and exciting, which was disappointing to see because we were looking to not reinvent the wheel. However, we are committed to learn from them and to do our best to do that in Evanston, even if there isn't a sort of a best practice or another plan to model off of. And so I just want to acknowledge that it will that process likely will be a little trickier and a little bit more art than science than I'd say I would like, and that probably will be the case for us all. But we definitely can move more in that direction, and it seems like that's what staff's recommending, and generally speaking, it sounds like that's what one of the things that I'm hearing here as well. So we look forward to bringing something forward that is much closer to that goal.
Councilmember Isles.
Thank you for the work. I enjoyed the presentation. It was really interesting to see the feedback. I'm glad that you weighted it in a thoughtful manner. That was useful, and I don't see that in everybody's work. There were lots of things that I was really interested in seeing, and it could be because I'm dealing with Quadrell and the tenant union in my ward, that I was really happy to see a lot of positive feedback on displacement and whether that's like RLTO enforcement or expanded rental assistance or maintenance and repair or property tax relief. I do think that we do need to have a discussion about just cause. I did see that it was 60% weighted. Wanted to talk about it. I know it's a touchy subject. I have a vague understanding of what happened in this committee in the past, that it was not put into the RLTO and it was set aside, but it seems like there was a promise to revisit it at some point. 6 years does seem like a long time for the people that want to revisit it to wait, especially when there does seem to be an appetite to talk about it. So I'd like to, at our special meeting, talk about what would be an appropriate length of time to revisit that. I don't want to go on too long because it's late. I mean, we were talking about money at one point, like where are we going to get funding? Is this plan going to have some specific ideas? Are you looking to us for that, like things like real estate transfer taxes, demolition taxes, vacancy taxes? Like, are we going to talk about things like that, or is that too detailed for this time period?
I would say in general, the elements of the plan, elements that can raise funds that are related in itself to housing, end up being, I think, the most relevant. For example, like a demolition tax or a housing impact fee, right, are speaking to housing sort of on both sides, right? The stick and then the funding mechanism.
Yeah.
I think when it goes outside of that and it's just how are we going to fund, we definitely have the ability to provide more detail moving forward, and don't want to limit ourselves too much into this is the current federal funding landscape. It's a 10-year plan, and want to have strong, attainable goals. But yes, that's definitely, that's sort of, I think, where we're heading in general in terms of the level of specificity.
We are a very big-hearted community. It's one of the things I like about living here. We have big ideas sometimes, and I want to see big ideas in this plan. but sometimes we don't talk about how to pay for them. And so I think that's also a practical, important part of what our discussion should be. But I'll leave it at there for now.
Councilmember Burns.
To that last point, you know, I don't, as chair, I'm going to make sure that we discuss just cause. It really never, I don't remember it coming back to Housing and Community Development Committee and the full committee making a decision to hold off even as long as we have, let alone 6 years. But I think it's an important, whether this committee agrees with it or not, it is very clearly a anti-displacement initiative, and maybe one of the few ideas that is actually like that has been implemented in some places. Like most things I hear kind of rough concepts that, you know, may not have been applied anywhere. Like just cause is a real thing that, you know, that we can at least evaluate. And I think this committee, both this committee and you know, other members of previously served on this committee have all said that anti-displacement initiatives are important to our work. And so I think it's a must that we discuss it. I work with staff to figure out what's the most appropriate time to do it. And, you know, again, I'm not weighing in at this point on whether or not I support it or what components of it I support, but I certainly think it needs to be discussed, and this is the appropriate time to do it. We're talking about strategic housing, and I think it fits perfectly within that. So I just wanted to let that be known. I've already let folks in the advocacy community to know that, but as chair, I plan to bring it up at the very least for discussion, and then, you know, this committee can decide whether or not they want to introduce something more formal. And then one last thing, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on the comment that was made earlier about inclusionary housing. And that, you know, I'll give one example because I had a bunch of notes that I was going to go over, but I don't want to take up any more time because it's late. So I'll save it for the next meeting. But, you know, one example, just so people understand kind of this idea of, you know, strategy and you know, really using that being like the logic of how something is accomplished. Take inclusionary housing was mentioned a moment ago. So one of our goals, objectives, something that's important to us is to address people who are lowest income. Right? It's very, very clear from the data, 50% AMI or below. Like those are, you know, the members of our community that are most housing cost burden. It makes sense. The lower your income, the more housing cost burden you are in a place with rising housing costs like Evanston. So the question is, so we know we need to create more units and more opportunity for that particular group. The strategy is how, like, how do we achieve that, right? And so one thing to look into as we try to build the logic, you know, for it is, well, we have an inclusionary housing program. So we take a look at it. Well, the program now really only supports, not really, but only supports 60% AMI and up. So the way it's currently written, especially if you look at the way before this recent amendment, like it only is going to give us 60% or higher, right? So we could rule it out and say, okay, well, it's not going to get us the more deeply affordable units. So then you say, okay, well, we just made an amendment. In that amendment, you know, we allow people to provide less affordable units, or to provide less affordable units if they're more deeply affordable. I think it is either it might even be at 10% or something like that, as long as you're providing more deeply affordable units, 40% AMI, et cetera. Okay, that sounds right. Okay, maybe we can achieve it through our inclusionary housing program. But then you think another layer into it. You say, well, the state or Cook County, I always forget who, has the tax abatement program that really encourages people to do more affordable units right now. So it's less likely so there's no incentive right now for them to do the 10% more deeply affordable units. I only know one example on Emerson in my ward where a developer is considering doing it. I'm not sure if they submitted an so I think they submitted a zoning application. I'm not sure if they've gone to land use yet. But outside of that, everybody else seems to be doing the 20%, you know, and doing the 60% or up AMI. So then you start to think about, okay, well, do we need to rewrite it? If we want if one of the ways we want to achieve, we want to develop more deeply affordable units is through our inclusionary housing program. Everything I just said then begs the question: do we need to rewrite it in order to further incentivize or encourage developers of market rate developments from, to provide more deeply affordable housing? That's strategy. You know what I'm saying? Like that. Once you, everything I just did right there to me is what strategy is, right? It's the logic, and the reasoning behind how you achieve an outcome. And again, as I said earlier, I think it's hard to do that if you have like 24 or 30 or 50 or however many different objectives. I think if we can figure out like a way to, if we can use the data to figure out which out of these objectives, strategies, whatever you want to call it, we feel is most appropriate for Evanston based on our needs, then I think we should take all those and do a similar exercise as to what I just did with a framework that we can apply, consistently to every idea. And so I just wanted to give a little bit more, a better understanding of kind of what I mean. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll add my support for at least for revisiting just cause. I know the gentleman who spoke at public comment mentioned that it was put back into Envision Evanston 2045. That's not true. It's not anywhere in that. I think it is. I'll echo what Councilmember Burns said. It is a housing anti-displacement strategy that has been implemented in other places, and I think helps stop displacement. When we discussed it, a year plus ago, I think there were aspects of it that I was not comfortable with the way it was written. I don't think it's mainly, I think, should be targeted at big corporate landlords, which I think we're seeing in many cases are bad actors. I don't think it should touch the owner-occupied mom and pop shops. That's a different level. Like those folks, like committee member Zalomi, are the ones who are providing affordable units already. They're not trying to gouge people. So I think it's something that I think we should, once we have time, revisit here. Councilmember Rogers.
I just want to respond to something you just said. I think there's a big gap between a corporate landlord and somebody who owns a small building. And I think those are the people who are the most vulnerable during this, because if we put too much pressure on those landlords who in the 8th Ward are providing naturally occurring affordable housing, and we make it difficult on them, they will sell out. And they are not going to sell to another small landlord. They're going to sell to the corporate landlords. And what's going to happen is the corporate landlords will build into their business models the ability to pay out the 3 months, and we've not achieved anything. So I think we have to be very strategic and careful if we're looking at this as a tool to make sure that we are not creating unintended consequences on it. I also, I met with representatives from MTO to discuss just cause during the campaign. And I do have some real concerns also. I'm going to bring it up again. I'm a condo owner, the only condo owner on the council. And there were some issues that were raised about condominiums being able to rent and how just cause would apply to them. And in those cases, people are renting out their main home. Perhaps for a short-term rental, or not, I'm sorry, don't want to use the term short-term rental, for a year or two, and what the consequences could be on your ability to return to your own home. So I think there are a number of things that need to be really discussed and make sure that we are not creating additional problems. I think it's great that we're trying to protect the most vulnerable, but we also have to make sure that we don't kick that up to the next level of people who are the next most vulnerable on that list, whether they be those smaller landlords or the people who cannot buy a single family home but have purchased a condominium in the city of Evanston. So that's just my 2 cents on that right now. And I'm sorry, I'm very tired. I've been here for 5.5 hours.
And committee member Sweeney.
Yes, I would just like to underline what you said and Bobby Burns said about revisiting just cause. I agree that we need to take a good hard look at whom we would be hurting by implementing just cause, but I do think some form or other of just cause would be extremely beneficial to many residents.
Thank you. And I think that concludes our discussion. I think that was a good start to things. We have one last item. If we could get a...
Sorry, before we move forward, I just want to make sure the 4 components of direction were clear. So we're staying on the track that the committee intends it to be. I think it's, if you can click on it again, Marion, or advance it. No. I think this is the video version. This is the shared version, I think, not the actual slides. Oh boy. And to tee it up, basically, just want to make sure, it sounds like the intent is to have a special meeting to continue providing feedback. And so the clarification that I wanted to make sure was clear from staff is that feedback at that meeting would be prior to staff moving forward and making an update. The slide isn't required. It's fine. So the current timeline again would be staff would be leaving this meeting and immediately working on an update that we would provide to the committee on November 11th for the following meeting on November 18th. It seems like the committee is interested in providing more feedback prior to that happening. Is that like
I think that's...
I'm seeing like one nod and a lot of sleepy faces, and that's very reasonable, but I want us to be on track here between now and the next meeting.
I think we're all nodding sleepy faces.
Okay.
But yeah, everything's been great. So
okay, so regardless, so then the timing of the next meeting then isn't important for staff because staff does not need to prepare an update. The update will take place afterwards, and we will prepare for that next meeting to have another updated timeline to make sure we're staying on track from there.
Yeah, the work is on us to think about this further and provide more feedback, and if we, who knows what that looks like at the next meeting, but considering we have the other special meeting, we might as well give that opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you for clarifying.
And if I can have a motion relative to item F, please. But I will move discussion and vote to change the Housing Committee Community Development meeting time to 6 p.m.
Second.
Okay. I will start things off in saying I prefer a 6 p.m. meeting time since we often have a pretty full plate to go through. I'll leave it at that.
Can I just add a clarification? My understanding is the request to move it to 6 p.m. for the remainder of the year to cover the heavy agendas, not necessarily to move the meeting time forever. However, if Councilmember Burns has any more context, I just wanted to clarify for people.
I think it's, if I can speak here.
Sure. Councilmember Burns.
I think it's honestly up to this group because again, I think what's most important, one is that we have enough time to get through a heavy agenda, as you just mentioned, but two, just making sure this time works for committee members. In your lives, obviously tonight even we're getting out pretty late, so I think if the committee is okay with 7, then that's good feedback. But if the committee would prefer 6 p.m. to get home a little earlier, I think that's something that we should also think about at some point.
Committee member Zalomi.
6 o'clock is fine with me. I'm retired now, so.
Jealous. Councilmember Isles.
I'm pro 6 o'clock.
Yes, I'm Mrs. Sweeney, and I vote for 6 o'clock.
Okay, I will make a motion to change the Housing and Community Development meeting time to 6 p.m.
I'll second it.
Okay. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Isles.
Aye.
Councilmember Harkaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Rogers.
Aye.
Committee Member King.
Aye.
Committee Member Murray.
Aye.
Committee Member Sweeney.
Aye.
Committee Member Zalomi.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We'll be back here at 6 p.m. for the rest of the year. Does staff have any updates for us?
Tonight.
Awesome. So
Right answer.
with that, we will adjourn. Thanks everyone for the work.